Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanwo TV and welcome to this UFO Disclosure 2023. This was going to be a part 3 to the previous video I did. This is the UFO Disclosure 2023 Senate hearings. This instead is going to be a debrief of the Senate hearings, and I've decided to make it a separate video, partly because of the amount of time that's gone past since Wednesday. It's now Saturday morning. But also because I want to bring up another subject as well, the Calvine photograph. There's been an update on that, a major update, which I want to cover in detail. Now, what I'm going to do first of all, now that it's difficult to know where to start with this, because of course everybody who is anyone in ufology and UAPology is like going on about this Senate hearing. I could show you almost anyone you can imagine. We've done hours and hours on this, and we can never possibly go through them all. So I'm going to have to be very selective and decide which one I want to go through. Now, I went to Post Disclosure World, which I'll just show you now. UFO Jesus here has not uploaded. He's not uploaded any videos, which surprised me actually. It surprised me actually he's not uploaded any videos. As you can see, his last one was 3 days ago, which was just before. It was like a prelude, 24 hours until the hearing's there. Since then, he hasn't uploaded anything, which is unusual. It's not like him. Maybe he's in a bit of a blue funk following the hearing. I don't know, but or maybe he's got other things going on in his life. I don't know, but I look forward to his input. I was hoping to do like a deep dive into his video on this particular subject, his own debrief of the Senate hearings. But what I'll do instead, I've decided in the end I could go to. I also considered doing Christina Gomez. She's done Christina has done a big thing with Jimmy. She's done a major video with Jimmy Church about this. She's very prolific. I mean, this is like, where is it here? Here we go, Lick. This is, God, this is a long one.
It was, that 15.
But this is always worth it. Her input is always very good. You see, this is like 2 hours, 11 minutes. And she does this thing with Jimmy Church here. What I'm going to do instead is I've decided simply the most expedient thing to do is go back to the live stream I was watching in part 1. That is Witness Citizen with Steve Bassett here. And as you know, we left them basically where they left. Basically, we'll catch up on where we left off. Because if you remember at the end of part 1, they were doing like a warm-up, an anticipation discussion before the hearings. And then, of course, they, like myself, did a watch party. They did it live. I did mine recorded. And then at the end of that, they do a debrief. They do an immediate debrief following the hearing on the same video. And we're just going to go through that now because take a deep dive into that, because what their input is very interesting, especially, of course, Steve Bassett. He gets some things right, some things wrong. And it's interesting actually to analyze what these guys have said immediately after the hearing in light of maybe probably some more calm and analytical perspectives following, giving us the chance to sleep on it for a couple of nights. So, but anyway, we'll just watch this video here. I've been thinking about how to do this. I thought about like downloading it and searching for highlights. I decided not to do that for 2 reasons. Firstly, it's time consuming. Remember, I used to do that with Kevin Logan and Christy Winters. And secondly, people accuse me of editing them selectively and misrepresenting them. So to avoid that, I'm simply going to play everything they have posted. And also, I'm claiming fair use on this. This is transformative work. So fair use under the copyright laws, I think, applies.
We're exploring public-private partnerships, ma'am, as you know, we've talked about in the past.
So this is the end of the hearing.
Is there a way to smartly crowdsource additional data that might be useful to augment some of my classified sources? And what does that look like? And how would we do it so that we're not overwhelmed by, everybody who wants to take a picture of everything?
Like to tell the committee before we close? Or do you have another round? Yeah. Do you have anything else you'd like to tell the committee before we close?
Thank you very much for allowing us to come and share a little bit of insight into what Arrow's up to and what we're doing. I hope to be able to share a whole lot more in the future. We have a lot of work to do. So if you don't hear from me
comments here,
outside, it's because we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kirkpatrick. Thank you for the hearing.
Thank you.
Well, as you can, obviously, this is a far more low-key event than the House hearing last year. Maybe that's an understatement. If you remember, the House hearing was in a much bigger room. There was a much larger panel of probably half a dozen or more Congress people and 2 witnesses, Moultrie and Bray. In this case, we just have basically Mrs. Ernst and Mrs. Gillibrand, and Mrs. Rosen seems to have departed. This is just those 3, and now these 2. Obviously, she buggered off, didn't she? But of course, there's those strange guys sitting around in the back who may be CIA, they may be something else, Secret Service, they may just be journalists. Although the journalist bench is actually out of frame here to the right. Now, the public gallery is in the background outside the frame here, where people, like, including Jeremy Reese, are all sitting. And so it's very, very it's very sparse, isn't it? Very sparse indeed, compared to last time, and that is dismaying. But anyway, let's hear what the guys have to say.
Well, there's a lot
to chew on. A lot to chew on.
yeah, a lot to chew on. I mean, I think for starters, on the positive side, got a new UAP video.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt that that's the thing, that video he showed, which is unexplained, the orb video, that's going to be absolutely chewed to pieces and broken up by the UFO community, and probably already is. I haven't had a chance to check all of the analysis yet. My guess is it may be connected to the Mosul orb, that still that Jeremy Corbell produced. It may be part of the same sequence. I don't know. This is going to be a long video, unfortunately, because, like I said, I've got to go through all this, then I've got another analysis to do.
It's a lot better than the last one. Looks a lot like that Mosul orb from Jimmy Corbell. The other thing is he said, and I saw Stephen, you smiling when he mentioned the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and that's a possibility. So I thought those were a couple of good things. Mr. Bassett, I know you have a lot of thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hear them. What do you got? Or Jay, do you want to go first?
I've talked a lot before. Let Jay go first.
Put your mic on, mate.
You need your microphone, Jay. Yeah. You got to turn it on now.
There's a lot to think about here. There we go. There's a lot to think about here, right? I mean, I'm sorry, I was a little flummoxed getting my thoughts together here, but it's interesting. Okay, like it's basically in some ways what I expected, and I think what many expected in terms.
Well, no, I mean there was a part of us, I think. I mean, I don't know. Based on what they were talking about earlier, I felt they were more optimistic. I don't know about Jay specifically, but I sensed they were more optimistic. I certainly was, as you know. Although, of course, it was always at the back of my mind that this could be some kind of massive damp squib.
We're listening to Sean Kirkpatrick, who is trained in the art of not revealing more information than he's supposed to, right? We're dealing with essentially like a DOD guy, and he's going to be, and his part of his whole job is to act to be as nuts and bolts and scientifically minded as possible. And at the same time, towards the end of the hearing, he was like, thanks for those nearly 24 witnesses that you sent me, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, so, where are they? Some of us, I think, were expecting the witnesses actually to be in the room and give their testimony. It wouldn't just be Kirkpatrick. Not this time, guys. Not this time.
There is some weight here that's very interesting, because like some of the witnesses that we know of, like Mario Woods, like Bob Salas, like others, he's crediting Gillibrand essentially. And
yeah, I mean Bob Salas in particular, his testimony about his testimony, of course, as you know, you've probably heard of Bob Salas. If you haven't, bloody, where have you been? Look him up. It involves tampering with nuclear weapons. It involves unknown intelligences tampering with nuclear weapons. That is very serious. I mean, you may have seen the film UFOs and Nukes or read the book. You may have seen the hearings that were at the National Press Club involving people involved in nuclear weapons. Now, there's no way this can simply be ignored or brushed aside or even belittled when it involves the health and welfare of our nuclear deterrent. Absolutely no way. So, well, it's why. Where was he? Where was Bob Salas? Why was he not invited? Things like that. It's maybe people who know more about government can say more. Anyway, to me, it did seem inappropriate.
Those guys, whoever that consortium is, maybe it's everybody that signed that letter. Recently, Marco Rubio, etc. I'm not sure, but who is sending those witnesses to him? What's that process like?
Yeah, there is a hidden hand, isn't there? There is a hidden hand here, and these guys understand that. And it's become increasingly obvious by what we were seeing there.
What I mean, and why were none of those witnesses, at their testimonies and their efforts and their histories?
Yeah, even if their statements have been submitted to Gillibrand, I mean, couldn't they have been read out? I mean, the witnesses don't have to appear. They may well still be anonymous. Obviously, they're not breaking the law, because their secrecy oaths have been expunged, but they may still want to be anonymous for legal or indeed personal or social reasons or professional reasons. And couldn't their statements be read out?
Baked into that dry fucking chart that guy had, right? Because
the dry fucking chart. I'm not going to go back and look for recaps now because I won't be able to find my place on this very 2-hour, 49-minute video. But he showed these statistic charts, which I suppose were interesting in a way, but dry, like this guy said. Fucking dry.
But there's an element here where we're still getting completely snowballed. This is progress. But from my perspective anyway, I'm looking at this as one step in an interrogation process. I'm listening to somebody, Gillibrand and others, who are looking at whether this office can get properly funded. However, at the same time, we need to be thinking in a bigger picture way where it's like, if we're focusing only through this guy as owning the only flaming hoop that information is going to go through, he has completely shown his cards as being somebody that's going to obfuscate the truth. Honestly.
That's a dismal way to look at it. Yes, I mean, I was under the impression that the budget had already been sorted out for Arrow. This was basically assessing Kirkpatrick's personal capability and proficiency in running the organization. But yeah, I mean, that's quite. If he becomes like the Nick Pope of the United States, we're in big trouble.
That's my perspective right now. I mean, I could be proven wrong. I'd be happy to be proven wrong by anybody.
Yeah,
but I don't buy what this guy is telling me. I buy that he is a naturally maybe skeptical person. I get that. But like, why would he do that paper with Avi about the possibilities of alien motherships and things like this, right? Like he's talking.
Yeah, Avi, that paper he co-wrote with Avi Loeb, speculating on the nature of extraterrestrial intelligence, which Avi Loeb believes was a Muamua, and he believes there are others out there, and the idea that they may even be interested in our oceans because they want our water, like in that film. I mean, I suppose it was similar to the film The Man Who Fell to Earth, where David Bowie plays an alien who comes to Earth because his own planet is drying up. It's losing its water into space, and they need water for life. So, yeah, interesting film if you've never seen it.
Out of both sides of his mouth with the two public statements that he's really given us.
Yeah, you see, he's I think Sean Kirkpatrick sounded very much on that hearing like one of these people who wants to run with the fox and chase with the hounds at the same time. And see, people like that are unreliable, because you never know which side they're on.
Avi's paper and this hearing, and that is a very, very typical perspective from somebody in a position like him to talk out of both sides of his mouth. But I think personally, it's kind of infuriating. And personally, I think that this is one step where we're basically listening to this guy's perspective, and we're basically trying to box this kid into telling us where the F he was when the graffiti showed up on the side of the building. And eventually we're going to figure out who the culprit was, how the graffiti got there, and like what's the history of that event, if that makes sense. I'd love to hear what Stephen and Sean have to say.
You see, Steve is like straining at the bit. You can just see it, can't you? He's going to rant time from Stephen Bassett.
Well,
Go, Steve.
I think, again, I talked a lot before. Let Sean go next.
Oh, all right.
Sure. Well, I mean,
he's psyching himself up.
Straight away, it's kind of a lot of it is the typical kind of DOD talk. Like for anyone who's watched my live stream yesterday, going through the history of the hearings here with the Air Force,
I didn't, unfortunately.
You got the same stuff. You got the same stuff today for the most part. I
do like this guy Sean Rash. He's cool actually. He runs this channel and he's a musician and he's actually written a song called UAP, which I think it's somewhere on his channel. Unidentified aerial phenomena. Unidentified aerial phenomena. It's kind of jazz-like song. It's really good.
There are differences that are worth mentioning, which is him mentioning the ET possibility, even though that maybe he said extreme before it, he didn't throw it out. They're just focusing on anomalous stuff. So
he sounds like a bit of a people pleaser. He says, "Well, I got to say things differently here." And the problem with people pleasers is they often try to please the wrong people, and you can't rely on them in that case because you can't rely on them to do the right thing in a difficult situation when there's pressure on them.
It's hard to take away much from this kind of hearing where the right questions weren't asked to get the information that we would like to hear. First of all, when they mentioned the whistleblower stuff and how that's going, that would have been a perfect opportunity to ask who at least are the whistleblowers or, confirming any information as far as, what we know the whistleblowers told them, anything like that. They just moved right past it. Is he going to be honest with us?
It's frustrating with these bureaucrats, right? And just talking generally now, whenever you listen to them talking about anything, right, it's always like they always like nibble around the edges and never get into the meat. It's like they seem to have an aversion to talking about the most interesting things. It's just they're ultimately cautious. They're mediocrats. They always want to tread the middle line. They don't want to anything that might rock the boat. They don't like, which means they tend to reject anything that's not too normal, and they tend to avoid talking about things that are not that are too abnormal. They want normality. They're neophobes essentially. They're frightened of change, and Kirkpatrick was definitely in that kind of frame of mind when he's talking to those people.
It's hard to say. If you go with Mr. Bassett's disclosure plan, I think that he will be, right? Or he'll be replaced.
But who with?
So, but it's hard to say from this. I know he likes rings. He's got a pinky ring. So for whatever that means.
I don't care about his personal life if that's what you're implying.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to give you some thoughts here.
Steve, go Steve. Strap yourself in. We're in for a ride.
I made some notes to help me, but so this is not in a particular order. But first of all, let me point out some things that maybe some people didn't think about. First of all, this is not a hearing; it's a formal briefing.
Yeah. It's not a hearing; it's an informal briefing. Well, considering like there was only 3 panelists, Mrs. Rose and Mrs. Gillibrand, Mrs. Ernst, and 1 witness. That was the only people at the table, and you could see all the empty chairs, couldn't you? There's room around that table for probably about 20 people, and you have like 4. And then you have those, like I said, you have those goons at the back. Who knows what they were? And even the public gallery was only half full. And the guy who got there at 5 a.m., he needn't have bothered. He might have well turned up when Jeremy did.
He did not take an oath when he sat down.
He did not take an oath, yeah.
And neither did Moultrie or Bray when they sat down before Carson's committee.
Is that what has to happen? I mean, Steve understands this because he's a lobbyist for the U.S. federal government. But do they have to like take an oath, put their hand on the Bible? It's like an affidavit, isn't it? You've got to tell the truth, the whole truth, and if you lie, then you're in trouble. That's the kind of thing. If you don't take that oath, then you can bullshit out your ass till your heart's complete, can't you? And get into no trouble.
This is a briefing. I'm here as a servant of the people and the government to tell you what's going on.
Servants of the people and the government, not the people as far as I can see, Steve, just the government.
Not part of a more elaborate and more significant process of addressing a very important issue that needs to be under oath because the process is going to be viewed by a lot of people, and it's has great implications or whatever. There's any number of reasons why people have to be under oath. But that's not the case. It's a briefing. Okay. Another point. Not all the subcommittee members were there. Just three.
Well, just three. Yeah, it's three subcommittee members, people on the Armed Services Committee. So, good point. There's many more of them than that. You can see by the empty chairs.
All right. So, again, briefing. If this is a proper hearing, they'd all be there. I can assure you.
Yeah.
If he was there and had to take an oath to be there, they would all be sitting there. But no, this is a briefing. They don't all need to be there. No problem. Okay.
It's very, very anticlimactic, generally, I would say, wouldn't it? I think we were shortchanged there, definitely, with all the hype surrounding it, which, to be honest, we all got into. Most of us got into.
It was definitely noted that he used the term extraterrestrial. Be assured, he does not have to say that word in that hearing.
He forced it out of his mouth.
It's not necessary. There's all kinds of ways that he could have answered those questions and never mentioned it, but he did. And as far as I'm concerned, and that's happened before, that's his way of saying, yeah, I know, I'm aware, I know what you're interested in, and so forth. I think the other thing I want to point out is that if you know anything about Blue Book, Arrow is not Blue Book. It's not even close to being Blue Book. It's way beyond that.
No, I mean, first of all, Blue Book got in all their cases, and their protocol was to close as many as possible, no matter what, calling them balloons, planes, whatever. There's a clear difference, as an Arrow only deals with the anomalous.
Yeah, Project Blue Book was basically it's along with Project Sign and Project Grudge, its predecessors. Was simply it was actually a public relations exercise, as J. Allen Hynek found out, and he knew that there were people researching this seriously behind the scenes. And of course, in 1968, they had the Robertson panel. The Condon report was released, and the whole thing was just shut down the following year. And Hynek's coverage of that, Hynek's commentary on that is that it was designed to suppress and stifle and basically fudge the whole issue.
So
Blue Book was an Air Force program.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, sure.
Arrow is a Department of Defense cross-agency program. Blue Book was set up to debunk the issue, literally as part of the truth embargo. This doesn't have any of the indications of that.
Well, apart from today's hearing, I mean, you do wonder. I mean, obviously, it's not as easy to suppress things down, to debunk things, because there's this community which has grown and grown over the years to hold them to account. I mean, there people were trying to in those days, but people like Hynek and his supporters. But now it's far more difficult. In the post-2017 world, you can't get away with it anymore.
Let's see. I think it's very notable that all three of the committee members that elected to be there, obviously Gillibrand was, and the ranking as it happens, but also the third woman. These are all women. That's
not really notable. I mean, women are being promoted, fast-tracked into positions of power everywhere now because of wokeism and diversity hires and things.
And the truth embargo, the vast intelligence complex that was created after World War II was a virtually totally male-dominated enterprise.
Oh dear.
Creating secrecy, building underground facilities, playing all those games, that is a male thing. We love it. We're addicted to it. We can't stop it. Does that mean that women are not in the military, that aren't being brought into higher level positions? No, that does not mean that. It simply means that I believe women are far more, how would you say, open to addressing the reforms needed to fix the abuses of the military intelligence complex, far more open to the idea of transparency, and so forth. And so I noted that. All right. Another thing.
Now I've got to make a big point about this, and I'm not going to go into too much details because I've done an entire video in this subject called "Women in Ufology." You can find it on my channel. There's no need for a link. There is a lot of wokery and feminism in ufology. there is the culture war has spread into ufology, and as you know, I've had a debate with Paola Harris on Planet X Radio about this, which was perfectly amicable. I've also had to challenge Alison Dunlop as well, which was considerably less amicable. And you know, I've had to make a stand in other areas where this subject comes up, but the lot of the big names in ufologies are very left wing, and what Steve has brought up here, as much as I respect him, I think he's making a mistake here, is essentially in line with that typical. It's in line with the sort of very classic feminist supposition, and it's similar to this idea, you know, that you hear this line from feminists all the time: "If only women ruled the world, there'd be no violence." And of course, that's false. That's utterly false. In a world ruled by women, there'd be a huge amount of violence. Not least because when you generalize across the population, men put together are more diplomatic with each other than women are. That's not to say there are many exceptions on both sides. I'm not saying all men, all women. I'm just saying when you generalize across the whole population. But also, this idea that women are non-violent is ridiculous. Have you ever seen women fighting? Women can be very violent with men, of course, but also with each other. I mean, they're just, you know, I've seen fights when they get drunk and start fighting in a social club or something. I've seen that in the hospital. You know, they really try to hurt each other. I mean, when men fight, you know, when they're in social situations, it's normally just pushing and shoving and things like that. Women try to hurt each other. They scratch each other's eyes. They tear each other's hair. They kick. They slap. They gouge. They bite. I mean, women really, you know, I've seen women fighting and they literally draw blood and they do serious harm to each other. You know, they really do. Women can be as violent as men can, if not more so. And women can be wise in their own way, and they can be stupid in their own way, the way men can. And I don't believe. I mean, I don't know if Steve is actually suggesting this. He is kind of suggesting that if we simply let's just hand all authority in the truth embargo and over to women, and it'll all be over. It'll be ended in no time, basically, because the truth embargo is a whole male thing. I mean, no, it's not. That's not true. I mean, saying these things has made me very unpopular in some circles in ufology, I can tell you. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who won't speak to me or won't interact with me for that way, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to say I totally disagree with what Steve has said. Again, my film, Women in Ufology, goes into full details about this.
At some point, it's the end, is when she got to the witness issue.
Yeah.
That's the most important. And what did we learn? Okay, there are witnesses. All right. Mm-hmm. We learned that apparently the Senate, and I think that
I'm not going to analyze the comments here in detail. All right, because that's not the purpose of this video. You can look at them yourself, but I may stop the video occasionally to mention Happy Days here. Was it? No, Carl Anderson said, where is it now? Michael M. Sorry, Susan Goff is a woman. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Susan Goff is the one who's been obfuscated. She's been trying to pull over the. Obfuscating is, I must get, you know, that's become a habit word here. She's been trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, people like John Greenwald Jr., people like Anthony Bragalia. Yeah, she's a gatekeeper.
House, too, has actually referred witnesses to them for consideration. Okay. Right. Gee, is it possible that many of the witnesses that they referred to them are the ones that Chris Mellon was bringing up on the Hill to do the private briefings with members of Congress as they decided whether to move forward legislation? I think so. Mm-hmm. Do we know who some of these are? Yes, we do. So, but here's something else. And he's going, yes, oh yeah, of course, we have the witnesses and we talk to them. But a lot of people didn't think for a minute, wait a minute. Some spherical object flying through a video that they don't quite know what it is, and then another thing flying through a video that when they do extensive analysis on it may be an airplane, and all of the other stuff that fundamentally dominated his initial presentation, which is totally appropriate and should have been transparently revealed and set up long ago, dealing with things in the sky.
Yeah, I mean, why didn't they? We could have had an entire hearing just about those things, and just instead of just bleating on and you know, derailing that and going on to more boring areas. I mean, bureaucracy is essentially boring because of the reasons I said before, because it worships the mediocre and the unchanging. It likes normality. It's as I said, neophobic. And that was frustrating.
What's going on there? Witnesses are not orbs flying through the sky. Witnesses are not something that light in the sky that people saw. I don't know what the hell it is.
Until they land and speak to us.
Witnesses are not that at all. You're not going to be running them through some sort of, I don't know, physics process where you determine whether they're human or not human or whatever the hell. Witnesses are individuals working for the government under oath in the military and elsewhere that have seen things of extraordinary implications. The shutting downs of nuclear missiles is not
exactly. And in fact, someone says here, David Bleat in the comments says, talk about crashed UFO retrievals and reverse engineering is never going to happen in Congress. Well, David Bleat, I think, is being a bit overly pessimistic here. It might do, but what's happening now is not. It's obviously not a step along that way, is it? It's not
an object in the sky. It's 10 missiles that are separately maintained in one of our most secret facilities, defending the country, being shut down in sequence, and it's impossible. And we have SAC-based officers that confirm it,
yeah.
who were there,
yeah.
who were given the task of turning them back on. That is something.
When Steve starts hitting the microphone, you know he's serious.
Else entirely. That's truth embargo stuff. Now, so what are we taking from this? First, they're doing everything they're supposed to do. They're setting up an entity that is supposed to do all the things that we sort of think they're doing, but now they're making it clear they are doing. Anything in the sky that is anomalous or we have some concerns about, we're going to be checking that out. We're going to be reviewing it. We're going to try to run it to ground. It is not Arrow's decision to shoot it down. It's not Arrow's decision to defend the country. Arrow is not NORAD, period. Right? So when the balloons are turning up, people are, well, where is Arrow? What the hell? Wait, where is Arrow? Right? Arrow is an entity being set up in the Pentagon that when the whole shebang is done, maybe some of the surveillance stuff that took place may be given to them if there is some uncertainty is what the hell they shot down.
Wait a minute, I'm not sure I understand Steve correctly. Is he saying that Arrow is essentially being organized specifically for the post-disclosure world, and that Arrow is essentially some kind of is it some kind of embryonic, or the term I use in my book is the U.S. Disclosure and Reconstruction Agency. I use that in my own novels, the Roswell trilogy. There, not this one, the second one, Roswell Revealed. It was the U.S. Disclosure and Reconstruction Agency, I call it. Yeah. So is that what Arrow is meant to be? I'm not sure I understand Steve correctly. Maybe that's what he's saying.
Okay. Arrow also may be responsible for considering how we filter and how we analyze these kinds of things. That falls under its purview because it appears, and this is very significant, and they alluded to it, but only to a certain degree, because remember, this is a process that needs to stay within the lines, that they have set up filters so that the real ET stuff won't even show up. I mean, if it's doing 20,000 miles an hour, we're filtering that out, okay? Because we know what it is. We're not going to send up an F-18 to try to shoot it down. It's a waste of time. They wasted $500,000 Sidewinder.
Now, Steve, I don't, as you know from my own discussion with Steve, I think he downplays Object Gate very much. I think it's far more significant than he's saying. If he didn't really want to talk much about it when I had him on my show.
On a balloon, and they knew exactly what it was. The damn thing was a Chinese balloon, and it became known, and it was flying over airspace, which made it really a problem for the country and very embarrassing. And so just on that basis alone, they had to shoot the damn thing down and film it, right? They might have let it go, except the Chinese, and we would have done the same thing. Said, no, it's a weather balloon. You've heard that before. And that irritated us, and so we shot down their goddamn weather balloon. They don't shoot sidewinders at Tic Tacs. You may recall there were a lot of them hovering around the aircraft carrier task force back in 2014 or 4 rather. They didn't shoot any sidewinders. Why do you think that?
We don't know specifically they shot them this time. I mean, they told us that the objects have been shot down. That's all they told us. Were they? Were they shot down? I'm not going to go back on. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to retread a well-worn path here on this channel, but we kind of we can take seriously anything that they said about those objects, or even why they mentioned them at all.
That was okay because they knew damn well it was a waste of time, and they weren't Chinese balloons. So again, that is there if you look for it. And so what she is tipped off here is that there is a whole separate thing going on with Arrow besides setting up all of the observational data analysis stuff, which they already have. Everything that Arrow is doing, our government can already do and has done. It just has been doing it in an inward-facing, fully classified way. And now, under the circumstances of the last 5 years, it is having to recreate it in a public-facing way.
Yeah, of course, as I've explained before, Arrow is just the latest kind of like rebranding of an organization that certainly goes back to 2007. And the White House lied about it because of the petition. Do you remember the Grant Cameron's petition in 2011?
In other words, it becomes a mirror, essentially. What do you call it? You got the inside, you got the outside. They didn't want to set up the public facing because to do that was essentially to open the door to disclosure. Once you start doing that, you're guaranteeing disclosure is going to happen. Blue Book was technically public facing, but my God, in such a limited way, it was ridiculous. And it was a fraud to begin with.
Yeah.
This is neither of those things.
I wish the TV series would come back. That wonderful TV series, which I really got into, as you know, from my videos and articles on the subject. I mean, the classic line is that the guy he was saying to Hynek, "I need you to write reports and close cases." It's kind of saying it's a cover-up without being too explicit about it being a cover-up.
Right. And so the equation that they are trying to solve, and I'm watching carefully for any hints as to how they're going to solve it, is this. Arrow needs to continue to be set up to do what is appropriate, and we expect an entity like that to do. And it takes some time, and it takes some money, blah, blah, blah. You could technically be setting up Arrow and expanding its capabilities and adding technology to it for 100 years. But obviously, we're not going to settle for that. And so the question comes down to, how much of Arrow needs to be kind of in place so that people have become satisfied that our government is legitimately now willing to run down every unexplainable event out there, right? In other words, if it's fully explainable, it's not going to get to Arrow. It's only going to get to Arrow if we don't know quite what that is. How much of that has to happen before the witness testimony begins?
Yeah,
and that's an interesting question. Again, you could delay it as long as you want because Arrow is a vast enterprise that's being set up and will continue to be set up for years. But the disclosure process is something else. And so it
just feels that we haven't made progress, you see. I mean, I agree with what Steve is saying. I mean, it took me a long time to come around to his way of thinking, but I do think that the scenario he describes and models is possible. That is willing disclosure in the near future, say less than a year. That is possible. And I'd put even stakes on it. Actually, I really, really would. Which means, of course, I've put a bet on that it's going to happen before 2025, as you know. So I get £5,000 if I win. Steve, it feels like that hearing we just saw did feel, or briefing, felt like stalling. It was like running on the spot too much. I did feel like they were trying to run on the spot, including Kirkpatrick.
Thinking is that it's pretty well established, and he has now come out and described what's going on, and they've got nice slides and they've got structure, and they're going to have some funding. So if we started bringing some of those witnesses in to testify under oath before the Intel Committee about the nuclear weapons stuff,
yeah,
the equation is Arrow set up enough that when that happens and people are hearing that testimony, they're going to be going, where in the hell was the Arrow back then, and why wasn't that being given to them? And the answer is, well, we didn't have it back then, or what we had was fully classified. Now we have an unclassified program to look at this stuff, and that's all. I mean, in other words, they just don't want it to be too incongruous. They want people to go, okay, we got our Arrow, and boy, listen to that testimony we just heard in front of the Senate committee. It's not ideal. They're trying to create a public relations package that the people will be comfortable with, right? That's about the best they can do under these circumstances. So I'm watching to see how that equation unfolds. Clearly, the witnesses are ready. They're ready to testify.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the thing. And then we have a good amount of people talking in the community saying that they've been told, people have talked to Kirkpatrick about reverse engineering stuff. We have Salas, other people that said they've talked to Kirkpatrick. So how long can it really go on before he devolves information on what he's learned from those?
Someone was mentioning crash retrievals earlier. We're never going to hear them in Congress. Well, according to this, the crash retrievals are being discussed openly in these committees. I mean, Tim Burchett has confirmed that essentially.
People, seeing as how it's already kind of out in the public, you have to address that. And I'm kind of surprised they didn't when they had the opportunity today. And also, do you think Kirkpatrick already, is he outright just like being an actor in this here, or does he genuinely not know what he's dealing with?
Well, he must know something.
He knows a hell of a lot more than he's going to say.
Yeah.
He's not being an actor.
We know that.
He is the legitimate head of
He wouldn't have co-authored a scientific paper with Avi Loeb if he wasn't much more open-minded and obviously had some kind of knowledge, especially if he's canoodling continuously with these committee members, which he is.
Project, and he is speaking to the aspects of the project that are appropriate, answering the questions in an appropriate way, and telling us what he can tell us at this time. Right? Nothing surprising about that. One way to look at it is a trial. All right. There's this very big, actually, I can think of one that comes from many years ago. I watched it for days, but I don't want to bring
we have a trial. We don't have any prosecution yet.
It up because it was so disgusting. The point is, it's a big-ass trial, and there's somebody out there for committing a terrible crime, and the audience is in there, and they're watching the thing go on. And as we know, trials in service to justice have to be conducted in a certain way. There are procedures and protocols, and you do things in a certain order. But there's people in that audience sitting in the background that just want to jump up out of their chair and scream, for God's sakes, the son of a bitch is guilty. Just convict him, right? Right? Don't go through all this crap.
Is Steve saying that essentially the briefing we just heard is a part of that process? I mean, it's not wasting the court's time?
It's convict them. And of course, they're going to be taken out of the courtroom, are they not? This is like that. There is a process underway. We want them to just jump right to it because we don't have any skin in that game in a way. We're not a member of Congress or the DOD or any of the other people associated with this are going to have their lives affected, their careers affected. We're not going to personally deal with the consequences of this if it isn't done well in terms of foreign policy. And on.
Oh my goodness me, Mr. Grey Owl is here. Hello, Mr. Grey Owl. Seemed a bit like Blue Book rolled up in a Robertson hearing and smoked like a spook. How you doing, Mr. Grey Owl? Oops. Good to see you. Mr. Grey Owl comments on my channel as well, and he designed the little like, share, subscribe screen that I put in the videos. Nice to see you, mate.
On and on. There's a big country they're running and a big world they're dealing with. And this is the most important issue in the world. So don't be shocked if there is a process that they are going to go through and stick with. Now, but those of us that are paying attention, I'm happy to pick out the odd, juicy tidbit. And here's one. right? I get it. It's 30,000 feet, folks. That's where I'm hanging out all the time. Actually, it's worse than that. I go up to 30,000 feet and I try to pretend I'm an extraterrestrial watching all this to get a sense of how they're
God knows what they think.
That's where most UAPs come through, apparently.
Apparently, I was listening to Richard Dolan. Was it Richard Dolan? Someone was speculating the other day. No, it was Elizondo. It was Lou Elizondo saying basically, I think I might have made this point in a previous video, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself. One of the reasons for the truth embargo is the government is frightened to speak publicly or change their policy rather about UFO transparency because they're scared of the response it might elicit in the ETs themselves. We know the ETs know about us. We know they're monitoring us. There's even evidence to suggest that they can control our thoughts and feelings. And we know they know what we're thinking because of they know secret things like the rendezvous point during the Nimitz incident, things like that. They knew where it was, even though this was discussed only with the flight crew and the air control on the aircraft carrier, things like that. And they're worried that if there's a change in policy and people, our perception of the ET phenomenon changes, the response it elicits from the ETs themselves. This is the third corner of this infernal triangle between the people, government, and the aliens, the ETs. It may result in them changing their policy towards us, and that's unpredictable. We don't know what that policy change might be. We know that our weapons don't seem to have any effect on them. They can neutralize our most potent military assets, that is strategic nuclear deterrence. So from their point of view, I can kind of understand it. I don't think it justifies it, though. It does not justify the truth embargo.
We learned today.
You noticed that Bob Salas and some other people mentioned that they had been brought in as witnesses to be interviewed?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't they put them under an NDA?
Were they there? Was Salas and other people that were sort of waiting were they waiting in the wings at that event?
Yeah,
they could have put them under NDA. Say, we're talking to you now. You cannot discuss that you have had any conversation with us. You can't discuss what you told us. They didn't do it.
Point.
And as a result, the witnesses have gone on sign and said, we're being interviewed. Well, they knew, you understand the consequences of that, right? Because to put them under NDA would have undoubtedly not gone over well, not only with the witnesses, but with us. And the process is moving along in such a way that they're going, okay, that's okay. We know where this is heading, so let them talk about that.
Yeah.
And the other thing
is the original because of the Gillibrand amendment, their original NDA was declared void, which means it would be a bit stupid to renew it. I'm sure Gillibrand wouldn't want that. I mean, it'd be kind of like going full circle for her, wouldn't it?
Kirkpatrick is going to be a focus of a lot of interest, a lot of attention. He's going to be asked to do this and that and speak and whatever else. And so if Kirkpatrick goes ahead and participates with Avi Loeb in an article, that's not violating his job. That's not speaking out of two sides of his mouth.
That is his job, as far as I'm concerned. That is his job.
To be, I'm not trying to be, I'm just trying to be informative here. That's him participating with Avi Loeb, who was out there as a chairman of the physics department of Harvard. And while he's dealing with what I consider a pretty safe play, which is, can we find some examples of ET technology out there if we look in the right way?
Well, to be honest, Avi Loeb his stuff on the Oumuamua was great, but he's now got this idea he can find this thing. There was another interstellar object that actually crashed on the Earth a few years ago. It landed in the sea off the coast of New Guinea, and he thinks he can find it. And so he's actually got the budget and he's got the organizational work for a ship, and he's going to send this salvage ship to the location to try and find the object that crashed. The problem is the object that crashed is only about 3 feet across, and it is in very deep water. I think it's like 6,000 feet. Now we know from experience that finding things on the seabed is very, very difficult. It took them, how long did it take them to find the Titanic? It took them 70 years odd to find Titanic. Titanic is much bigger than this object. Titanic is actually about 900 feet across. This object is 3 feet across. Really, how can you possibly hope to find something 3 feet across in such deep water? But well, Loeb thinks he knows what he's doing, and indeed Harvard have given him a budget, and he's got a ship together. He's going to get like a mini submarine and divers and people like that. So if he can do it, good luck to him. But I'm skeptical.
But I'll take it. You know, he's definitely not John Mack, but I'll take it. And he's adding gravitas, and so he does this article with him, which is fine. It's showing a willingness to interact with the academic community. Safe play, given we're talking now the chairman of Harvard Astronomy. But in the article, they mention the idea of extraterrestrial probes. So what Sean has done is connect him once again to the extraterrestrial issue without screaming into the top of his lungs in the middle of a hearing. So as you watch it from that perspective, you see how they are navigating this in a way that they are serving the essential things that have to be done in such a situation, while doing their best to let us know that they're not idiots. They know how to read books. They can watch documentaries, okay? And they probably know a lot more. They know a lot more about this issue than they can talk about. And they probably are looking forward to the day when they can sit down and say, ask me anything, okay? Ask me anything. That day will kind of be coming, all right? But we're going to have to go through this process. My concern is not about the process that I see unfolding. My concern is whether Putin is going to use a tactical nuke in Ukraine. And if he does that, I assure you this thing is going to be tabled, all right? My concern is...
Well, you know my opinion on Ukraine, and you know I think it's not... I think Steve takes a very mainstream position on Ukraine, and I don't have to reiterate my own misgivings about that. And it's not Putin we have to worry about; it's NATO.
There are going to be some even worse political developments in the United States, so awful that this issue will be tabled. So I'm thinking along those lines.
He's technically right, though. I mean, if there is an escalation in the war in Ukraine, I mean, forget blame here. It's if there is a massive escalation in the war in Ukraine, we already have the Russian foreign minister warning London, warning the UK about depleted uranium munitions. They're saying they're classified as WMD because, of course, they produce terrible radioactive fallout. They're sometimes called silent nukes. I don't want this to flare up any more than anyone else does. We can forget who's to blame here. It's the people. Firstly, the innocent people of Ukraine will suffer, but of course, it will spread out to the rest of the world. And Steve's right. I mean, it would completely bury this whole process that he's talking about. And what concerns me is there may be people trying to stop the process. Will flare it up deliberately for that very purpose. After all, is it a coincidence that 9/11 happened just a few months after the Disclosure Project hearing in May 2001? I think 9/11 was done for several reasons, but one of them may well be because of that hearing. It was completely forgotten about after that, and things could be arranged to make people forget about this, and I don't want that to happen. I really don't.
Is what could most put at risk this process continuing in a timely way. But barring that, we're on a relatively good pace. They have a very simple decision. Do you want to have this very contentious, difficult 2024 presidential election, which starts this fall, in which this whole issue of unidentified phenomena and the possible extraterrestrial presence is still kind of hanging out in the air? Oh, I don't know yet. We can't do this. We can't do that. And the members of that are running for president or for Senate or the House are in a position where, what do? They can't all be Tim Burchett. They're going to be asked about this. What are they going to say? It's going to be a friggin' nightmare.
I wish they were all Tim Burchett. And I wish all our UK MPs were Andrew Bridgen, but that's not the world we live in. It's one step at a time, unfortunately. One seat at a time.
It's going to be ridiculous. On the other hand, almost done, Chris. On the other hand, if they can wrap it up and get it done this summer, then every single candidate for president, for Congress, for Senate, hell, for dog catcher, will be able to ask a question in a time when the ET reality is fact. So what candidate so-and-so do you think about that? Well, I'm still getting up to speed on it. I recently read a fine book by Richard Dolan, sharp guy, by the way. I may read the second one soon. Also, I'm becoming kind of impressed by Stan Freeman works, blah, blah, blah. And they're
goodness me. How long would it take, actually, if you started from scratch to read through the entire ufological canon, say all the major books? I think if you did it full time, you could probably do it in a few weeks. Funnily enough, I'm writing I've just written an article for UFO Truth magazine about a person exactly like that. And yeah, you can. I mean, if you're intelligent and you are dedicated, and you can very quickly absorb information. So yeah, I mean, I think some of them may have already done a bit of secret homework anyway, without telling anyone.
Actually giving legitimate responses and don't look like idiots. That's the decision they have to make. Are we going to be able to address this issue insanely and not look like idiots? Or is this campaign, which is already going to be a fiasco in a lot of ways, going to be even worse because we just can't pull the trigger on bringing in the witnesses who under oath can literally slam this thing down, right? And end it, right, for all. This is the decision they're making. That's what I'm following. And I'll be talking about ad nauseum the next 4 months.
So along those lines, Steve, thank you so much. In terms of slamming it down, and you mentioned Tim Burchett, I think there are some people that have been anticipating the long rumored House hearing that'll be kind of a follow up to this. That supposedly the people are looking at June for a House follow up that Tim Burchett may be chairing or maybe very heavily involved in.
Tim Burchett is not a chair of a committee.
Okay, so he's working on it, but he's going to be there, but he's not going to be chairing that committee. Okay,
I mean, if it's his committee, but he's not on a committee. Well, there's one committee that he might be on. Let's just say that Tim doesn't need a committee. Tim is going to get his issues out there probably more than anybody else because
Tim Burchett just he one of the most revealing things he said was when he was basically gonzoed by some guy on the street just walking along the Mall. I mean, he's literally motor mouthed when it comes to this issue, and we need people like that. Not these just autistic and just babbles, but he's open. He's willing to discuss this issue with a frankness that none of the others have. Not even Rubio, not even Gillibrand.
He is unfettered. He does not have really any committee or entity to answer to, and he's getting a lot of great feedback on this. And I think the issue that I'm looking for is who is the next Tim Burchett? Who is the next member of Congress who doesn't sit on some fancy dancy committee and nobody knows who the hell they are that goes, wait a minute, I'm going to go on MSNBC or Fox News and I'm going to tell them what I think about this phenomena, and I'm going to get in the news. And believe me, they think that way. And Tim is just the beginning of what I consider to be a rather interesting development there in terms of how many members of Congress are going to step into this to be ahead of the game.
And more Mike Gallagher's, people like bringing up Wilson Davis and things like that. Absolutely, I completely agree with you. Do you think that the House hearing may provide the purported House hearing may provide an interesting kind of like not necessarily good cop, bad cop, but we might be looking at two different sides of a coin that might be kind of framing things contextually in a broader way? And do you think that the ufology community might have reason to look forward to the House committee hearing more than what we heard from Sean Kirkpatrick today?
In my view, the House hearing was fairly similar actually in tone. It was bigger, more elaborate. They had, like I said, the Moultrie and Bray. They had about 6 or 7 panelists. But where was the difference? What was the real difference between them?
Did Sean Kirkpatrick speak specifically to a House hearing? I didn't notice that.
Oh, no. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Him speaking to the Senate subcommittee today. Do you anticipate that the House committee hearing that will be upcoming might be more the red meat that we're looking for from the ufology kind of UAP anomalous studies community?
All right. Well, let me put it this way. I've already read enough. I have a huge media article archive that I manage. It's not 13,000 articles. So I think now I've linked 5,000 articles on this subject. I mean, when I say the subject, I don't mean just any UAP thing. I mean related to the congressional stuff and the DOD and all that kind of crap. About 5,000 articles since 2017. I read them all. Okay, so here's the deal. It's not going to be like the House is going to have a different version of the phenomena. This is already turning into a competition between the House and the Senate. There have been several statements by members in the House, basically, that like, we need to have a hearing, right? Now, they had a subcommittee hearing under Carson. Okay, fine. That's it, all right? There have now been, essentially 2 Senate hearings in 2 different committees, all right? And I'm sorry. There has been a House committee and a subcommittee, and that was Andre Carson's subcommittee. And now there's been a Senate hearing in a subcommittee. All right. So they're even. It's 1-to-1. But Gillibrand managed to get something off on the issue with that May 28th hearing in front of that same subcommittee, but with Austin present. All right. So, but clearly, the major.
Remember, Andrew Carson was the chair of that House hearing last year. He was, I think that was him anyway.
Legislation was put together by Gillibrand, Warner, and Rubio. Now, Diego got involved out of the House in terms of some of the language, which is good. And Gallagher got some shots in there. But let's be clear. These 2 houses of Congress are very, very competitive, right? They have equal roles in legislation. The bill has to clear the House and the Senate, be reconciled and signed by the president. And so the idea that one of these houses of Congress is going to dominate what is the most important issue in the history of the human race is not going to go well. And so the House, which may be playing a little catch up here, is going to assert itself. And you're going to be competition between who can hold the more hearings than the other, which of the stronger committees can hold a hearing, for instance.
Well, in that case, what we saw on Wednesday, what these guys have just seen, is rather a feeble opening move, isn't it? I mean, it's true. I mean, I was saying just beforehand, it appears that the U.S. legislature has grown some teeth, some much-needed teeth, following these decades of silence and subservience to the deep state. However, if they are really in competition with each other, well, neither of them, they're both a bit lackluster, aren't they? They're sort of like they're playing like Brazil and France in the 98 World Cup final, just passing the ball here, passing the ball there. I'll pass it to you. No, you pass it to me. Yeah. That's the impression I get anyway.
Gillibrand is, it chairs a subcommittee of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Now, if I'm the Armed Services Committee chair in the House, whose name I don't happen to have handy, I'm going, why don't we hold one in front of the House Armed Services Committee, not a subcommittee? All right. Why is this important? Do you know how many members of Congress made their bones, got their historical legacy, and advanced their careers because they were involved in major hearings before the United States, whether it was the McCarthy hearings or the Iran-Contra hearings or the, there have been a lot of partisan hearings, and of course the Watergate hearings and on and on. I mean, literally made them. All right, this is where you have millions of people watching you literally do your job. And that's why you see them posture so much. That's why they see them go through that nonsense. This hasn't changed. And so right now, for the last 5 years, it has been slowly dawning on more and more members of Congress some of who are committee chairs, subcommittee chairs, The biggest event in human history is taking place. Am I going to sit it out? Am I going to let my colleagues kind of get all the glory? Is my committee going to be a potted plant?
That would be my position, Steve. But the problem is, I think maybe Steve is overestimating the powers of imagination and nerve that these politicians have. Just out of interest, I just want to check something out. Let's have a look here a minute. I'm going to look at some of the recordings of the House Un-American Activities Committee, just to from the now. This is interesting. The House Un-American Activities Committee. This was a series of an entire series of hearings that took place in the early 1950s. Let me find a good one here. It's one with all the arguing in it. It actually began in 1948. Like you see, it's one from 1948. There's one from 1947, year of Roswell. Yeah. Oh, so let's just go to this one here. Because now, just take a look at this. Let's have a look. Right. Now, obviously, this is slightly different. This is actually in a much larger room. I don't think it was not the same room that the House UAP hearing took place in last year. It's also, I think it's an even larger one there. Look at that. And they're swearing an oath because it's a proper hearing. They're doing it publicly. Look at all the people there.
Don't believe you have the right to ask a question of anybody.
It's very apparent that you're following the same line of these other witnesses.
I am following no line.
Which is definitely the communist line.
I am using my own head, which I shall continue to do.
You're excused. And if you want to make a speech, go out here under one of the big trees and sound off.
They said people were allowed to smoke in those days, weren't they? Who was this speaking here? This is interesting stuff, isn't it?
Mr. Chairman,
the question is, have you ever been a member?
Look at all the cameras. Look at all the people just. The news reporters were just walking around taking photos.
The Communist Party.
I'm framing my answer in the only way in which any American citizen can frame his
then
answer
you denied,
to a question
then
which
you,
invades his, absolutely invades
Then
his
you
right.
denied, you refused to answer that question. Is that correct?
I have told you.
That says how much more argumentative they are over this than they were about the UFOs.
I will offer my beliefs, my affiliations, and everything else to the American public, and they will know where I stand, as they do from what I have written.
Stand away from the stand.
For Americanism for many years, and I
stand away from the stand.
Fight for the Bill of Rights, which you are trying to destroy.
Stand away from the stand.
Oh, if only Kirkpatrick had done that, yeah. Look at the. Right, yeah. Let's carry on anyway. Can you see that all right, my guys? Yeah, I think I just have to check back every so often because I'm.
It's just the Intel Committee and the Senate's role because they're so friggin' powerful and bipartisan. This is all going through their head, and it won't be long before you're literally going to see them vying for public attention. All right.
As I said, I'd like to see scenes like what we've just seen from the House Un-American Activities recording there. I'd love to see that. In the big room with lots of people, reporters taking photos everywhere. I mean, that'd be ideal, wouldn't it? But Steve, I think maybe Steve doesn't. I mean, he should, because he's the guy who knows these people. He's the lobbyist. He interacts with these people all the time. But maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe Steve actually has judged their. Oh, pardon me. He has judged their enthusiasm correctly. I hope he's right.
Is what's the next committee to make a move? All right. Now, there's been talk about a House committee, but nothing specific yet. All right.
Maybe the intelligence.
But there's going to be more of that, and that is fine. However, it can't become a circus. In other words, it's appropriate for the Intel committees and the Armed Services committees to lead in this. The Agricultural Committee, not so much. And so there's committees that are in the gray area.
Well, I don't know about that. I'd love to know what aliens eat for dinner.
They kind of have a national security role, but it's not that big. Now, to the extent that people who are trying to force themselves to the front of the photograph, who really shouldn't be doing it, there are internal ways that can be dealt with, peer pressure and so forth, meaning, look, know your place. All right. Don't go there. Would be a mistake. And so there will be a certain amount of that. Clearly right now, nobody is containing Tim Burchett. He is the absolute wild card. And I love him for this.
Me too.
But we can't have too much of that. Okay. But it's nice to have some of that, right? Because it's a message to the rest of the Congress. Look, if you want this to be an orderly process, if you want it to be done in the best way, if you want it to have the most beneficial public relations outcome, get on with it. Because the Tim Burchetts of the Congress are not going to just sit there, right, when they know the kind of press they can get while you dog them on this. Go, it's going to be so hard. I'm doing my Bill Burr stuff. It's going to be so hard. How can we deal with this? Let's just put it off. No. He's sending that message. I love him for that. Okay. And so that's about the most I can say about this, other than there will be more hearings. But I'm only.
Why can't we have presidential candidates like Steve Bassett? Yeah. Steve for president. Yeah.
Interested in one. The only one that I am interested in that's really going to shake the tree is this. It will not 80% be the Senate Intel, not the Senate Armed Services, but the Senate Intel Committee. For a number of reasons, not the least of which, they have the broadest range.
It was the House Intel subcommittee that did the hearing last year, wasn't it? Yeah.
What we'll call classified capabilities. All right. They can do the classified hearing, the semi-classified hearing, the in the skiff hearing, the on the moon hearing, whatever the hell they got to do. Right. And so the Senate Intel Committee is going to be the committee that's going to put out the announcement that a hearing is going to be held on such and such a day before this committee, in which we're going to hear from pilots and SAC base officers about their experiences with this phenomena in whatever way that it has happened. And they will testify under oath, and we will try to get and learn as much as possible, and we will do it transparently in front of cameras. However, and this is one of the nice things about the way this is done, every witness that sits down in front of that committee and takes that oath knows that, one, they had better not lie, and if they do, they're screwed, and two, they don't have to lie. Now, what do I mean by that? If I'm sitting there and some member,
if they take an oath, I suppose it's like it's perjury if they don't. It's like lying in court.
Asked me, Captain, with respect to what you were doing at the SAC base on it, blah 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 blah, and then something else happened, and what can you tell us about that? If I can't say anything about it, I will simply say to the committee member, Senator, I'm unable to speak about that in the public forum, but I will be happy to answer that question in a classified private setting. They all know that. Now, they would like to minimize that. That's one of the reasons
they can't do that now. Interviews.
They don't want to put them in a position where they can say that. They want to get that information, preferably ahead of time, in classified briefings, also under oath, so they know where to go and where not to go. But they have the right to ask anything they want. And if I'm one of those witnesses, it helps me to know that I am not going to have to lie. All I have to say is, now, if I say I'm taking the fifth, well, that's bad. That's not good. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's the Fifth Amendment, which means a witness is not obliged to give testimony in court if it could incriminate themselves.
I don't have to lie. And the public is going to be fine with that because they're going to be getting plenty of juicy information that's going to, oh my God, this is amazing. And so if something has to go to the classified setting, no big deal. And I'm sure somebody will appropriately say, if questioned by the press, that what we are learning in classified meetings with these same witnesses will be brought to the public's attention when it is appropriate to do so, right, with respect to national security, that we're not burying this, that we need to know this, but you're getting a lot of this information, and there'll be more that we might be able to tell you as certain things can be declassified. As we move into what I call the post-disclosure declassification, what do I call it? Deflation, right? Where they start to shrink the totality of everything they have filled, that hole with, which is pretty much everything. So that's
an interesting way. That's an interesting visualization, actually, there that Steve has just given us. Never really thought of that before, but it is like that, isn't it? Because most of it's just rubbish anyway, and it lies. So yeah,
that's what I'm looking for. When you hear that announcement from the Intel committee, just set your calendar and start counting the days until President Biden finally says, "Yep, non-human intelligence."
President Biden is not, or the person known as President Biden is, I can't talk about too much on YouTube, but basically, I don't call him that. He's going to come hobbling up. Look at Objectgate. He turned up a week late and just, it's a recreational balloons of some kind. I'm not sure. Things like that. He's not going to be the one doing the announcement. It'll be someone from the Pentagon. It'll probably be General Van Herk again, who'll come out and he'll do the disclosure announcement. Biden will probably turn up a couple of weeks later, and everyone will ignore him. Yes, apparently we were not alone. We have aliens up there somewhere. Kamala, where's my script? Oh, I need some more amphetamines. So forget Biden. He's out of the equation.
Well, that's beautiful, Mr. Bassett. I had a really great time with you guys today. I should probably get to the office and do things I'm paid for, if that's okay with you guys. But I had a great time with you guys doing this, and thank you so much.
Sean, that's true. What Sean says. Most of us, we do this in our own time. We're not professional. It's not something we earn money from. We have jobs like everyone else.
You have a paid job? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, believe it or not.
It's actually it's the second one in all of ufology, but we're proud of them. We're proud of them.
Hey guys, look, let me mention Jay, and I hope you'll be there, Sean. But Jay and I are going to be speaking at the contact.
Right, that's the end, really. I think. Okay, that was very interesting. That was kind of, interesting stuff. Interesting analysis there from the one and only legend that is Steve Bassett, and of course his colleagues there, Witness Citizen. I really don't know what to add. I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know how this is going to end. What I'd like to is for Steve's vision to come true. That is, we do get very soon another date for another hearing, which will be better than the one we just had, where you will have witnesses. You will have open discussion on the ET hypothesis. That's what I'd like to see. So far, these hearings have been half-hearted affairs. I've tried to see the good in them. I've tried to be positive. I certainly was with the House hearing last year, which is actually a lot better than one we just had now. But it was both were along similar lines. On the other hand, as I've said before, you can be a pessimist and you can moan about it. And you can say, well, it's going to, the next hearing will be just as boring. All right, you can be a pessimist, or you can be an optimist and say, no, this one might be different. In my view, it's always, as a general strategy, it's better to be an optimist than a pessimist, because if you are an optimist and you're proved wrong, you feel disappointed. But if you're a pessimist and you're proved wrong, you miss out on all the fun. So, as I said, I'll just put a bookmark in it now, and all my hands are disappearing. Here we go. Ooh. I'll put a bookmark in it now, and come back to this subject as and when coming back to this subject is required. But right now, there's something else equally important, if not more so, that we need to talk about. Well, hello there, guys and gals. How you doing? I'm back. Now, I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do this video. I sort of changed my mind as I was going through it. I was toying with the idea of making it a two-parter. I was toying with the idea of deep diving another video. I decided not to do the deep dive, but instead come on to this update about the Calvine UFO, and then after that, I want to do a little bit of a redux, a little bit of a little trip down memory lane, shall we say, into Hapanwo TV history for amusement more than anything else, and to make a point. But to begin with, we're going to talk about the Calvine UFO. Now, I have brought this up before. I did a video called UFO Disclosure 2022. Why now? That's what it's called. You can look it up. I'm not going to put a specific link in the description box, but if you go to the UFO Disclosure portal, which I have put a link in there too, you will find a link to that very, very easily. It's on that page. Otherwise, things just get clogged up with links. But basically, we're going to have a look at what has been going on in the world of the Calvine UFO incident. Just to give you a little bit of a reminder, a brief reminder. I'm not going to go into details. Back in June 1990, two young men were walking through the Scottish mountains at the Cairngorm National Park, and they happened to see a strange thing. You happen to see an aeroplane, a military jet, a fighter or attack aircraft from the RAF, escorting or intercepting, I'm not sure, flying alongside a very, very peculiar object. Now, I should point out, and you probably have already noticed this already, and some of you are going to think you're going to be smart asses by telling me something I already know. That's not the photograph. The photograph is something very different. I have shown it to you, and indeed I will be showing it you again in a minute, because the original photograph turned up. It literally turned up after 32 years of people wondering where the hell it was. The original photograph is here. This is a facsimile by an artist. This is a facsimile based on descriptions of the photograph and a crude photocopy, which, now, if you ever hear Nick Pope, and we'll be hearing a bit from him later, if you ever hear Nick Pope boasting that he has a big blow-up enlargement print of the Calvine UFO photo on his office wall, and he lost it while he was moving offices. Nah, that's not true. This is what he had. He had this artist's impression of the photograph. This is just like a little crop of it, which is not the real photograph, just to make that clear. The real photograph is almost as impressive as this. It shows an aircraft, rather like the one you see here, this strange lozenge diamond-shaped object. It's hard to see what its actual shape is. It seems to have little tail fins there, and there's some structures underneath. It's not an island reflected in water, by the way. That's a load of nonsense. And that plane is not a man in a boat. Everything's back to front here. It's that one, yeah. That plane is not a man in a boat. There's all that nonsense you've been hearing. Even Clarkey doesn't actually believe that anymore. Clarkey, Dr. David Clark, yes. Right, we're gonna go into Dr. David Clark. All right, so to begin with, let's check my notes. Yeah, we're going to let's go through all here. Now, hotel rooms, hotel kitchens. Now, hotel kitchens are a little bit sinister, aren't they? Because of the person who killed Robert F. Kennedy Sr. It wasn't Sirhan, it was someone else. That is going to come up in another story. But anyway, when it comes to photographs, there was the central figure in this whole mystery is who took the photo. Who is the mysterious photographer? And that has been the whole focus of this has been on finding that individual. And the reason is because if we can find that individual, he is one of the principal witnesses. We can get him to confirm or deny some of the statements that were attributed to him, such as the object ascending vertically and silently, hovering, and then just shooting straight up into the zenith. Now, Dr. David Clark casually dismisses that element as secondhand anecdotal. I don't think there's a reason to consider it worthless, but it's only secondhand as long as the originator remains mute. That's the thing. So if this person can be found and he can say, well, yeah, it did fly up into the sky, or no, it was flying along like an airplane. I could hear the jet engines and things like that. I see. It's whether Clarkey, Dr. David Clark, I've given him a lot of stick over the years. He's done a lot of good with this particular case. I think he's done a very good job. He's really, really excelled himself, I think. And my attitude towards him has changed. However, he has ruled out the possibility that this could be what I think it's quite likely to be, which is an artifact of non-human intelligent construction. He's just said there's only two possibilities here. Either it's a hoax and it's a balloon or something, or it's a completely new kind of aircraft. There's only those two possibilities. And as in the previous video, I explained why I think it's likely he believes that. He believes that because he had contact with somebody. Anyway, he had a piece of information given to him, which I'll talk about in a minute. But anyway, here's his little blog here. I'll just show it to you. The Calvine UFO photo, an unsolved mystery. Here we go. Now we're going to go to he has a Substack account, which is interesting, and he does. Now you'd think I didn't expect him to have a Substack account. All right, I'll sub to him. Here we go. I'll subscribe to him on my own Substack. Well, paid? What are you talking? Oh dear. What? Oh, hang on, here it is. Here it is. No, here it is. Look, here we go. Whoops. Here it is. Dave Substack. Okay, right. Now, I'm all right. I follow him. I've subbed to him. I'm not going to pay him. But now this is it. The Calvine UFO photo, an unsolved mystery. They say that nature abhors a vacuum, and that's definitely true in the case of the mysterious Calvine UFO photograph. And this is the photo here. I've shown you it before, haven't I? This is the famous photograph. I told you it was good, didn't I? I've done it, like I said, in the background video. You know all about it because because I've done it in my UFO Disclosure 2022. Why now? I discussed this in great detail. But it says here, copyright Kevin Russell, care of Daily Record, Glasgow. That's interesting, isn't it? So a good detective always looks on the back of every photo, doesn't it? Doesn't it? He always looks on the back of every photo. Last week, the Scottish Daily Record, I'm actually going to go to that article of the Scottish Daily Record in a minute, reignited the hunt for the elusive photographer when it revealed the name Kevin Russell. That name appears on the reverse of the print that was processed at their Glasgow office in August 1990 before the paper was turned over the negatives to the Ministry of Defence. As I explained previously, this was basically taken into custody for the MOD, classified. One big print was left behind, and that was the one that Craig Lindsay had. The Calvine investigation team with whom I've been working were aware of the name since early last year, but we decided not to release it until we had done everything possible to trace Russell using publicly available sources. But despite a 10-month investigation during which our team contacted more than 200 people in Scotland and further afield who share that name, no one has fessed up with being the Kevin Russell. Right, so no one's actually admitted they can't actually find that. It's a shame it's such an unusual name. I'm sorry, I'm saying it's the opposite. It's a shame it's such a common name, Kevin Russell. I mean, we know a lot about him. Though. We know where he worked, when he worked there, etc., etc. So that does help. Our inquiries established that a man by that name, at that time in his mid-20s, both lived and worked at the Pidlockery Hydro Hotel from 1990 to 91 as a kitchen porter. Oh, he wasn't a chef. All right. I heard he was a chef. But apparently in these seasonal jobs, you do chop and change different jobs. All right. By the way, so a kitchen porter is kind of in the kitchen. Yeah, he is. Now, that's not the same as a hospital porter, I should point out. Never get those two confused. I met a guy on my forum once, and he said, "Hey, he had the nerve to call me Brother Porter." And I said, "Well, all right, you're Brother Porter. You're a hospital porter." He said, "Oh yeah. I worked in a hospital in Birmingham, in the 70s, and I was a kitchen porter." I said, "Stop right there. A kitchen porter at a hospital is not a hospital porter." So I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to these things. Anyway, as Ronnie Corbett used to say, on with the joke. Those who worked with him said he came from Glasgow or Falkirk, And now Falkirk is a town close to the so-called Bonnie Bridge Triangle. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. UFO flap around the mid-1990s, but despite wide media publicity, no new leads have emerged, adding to the growing mystery. How can someone disappear so completely? Has he emigrated, or has he been abducted by aliens or the MIB? More likely. But you do have to look abroad, don't you? Because people do, of course, move around. Hotel people who work in catering and travel and tourism more than anyone else tend to go abroad. Even so, I would expect his family or friends to know something about his story. In the absence of a resolution, the legend has continued to grow and move in some very odd directions. Since the only first-generation print of the iconic image was released via my Daily Mail exclusive in August 2022. Oh, yeah. I mean, I know I've given this guy some stick over the years, but, you know, that is very, very good work. That was excellent work, what he did there. I mean, I really might take my hat off to him there. The lack of immediately satisfactory resolution on the mystery created a level of intolerable psychological dissonance among those who are fascinated by the story. American folklorist and legend scholar Bill Ellis, in his book Aliens, Ghosts and Cults 2001, talks about how people keep rumors and ambiguous events alive for a debate about the reality status that both create and sustain modern legends. What's the alternative, Dave? Are we supposed to just not talk about it, not debate it? I'm nearly out of dragon juice. This type of heated debate as to whether a story or photograph is true or false is characteristic of ufology. These days it is. I mean, to be honest, in 1990, this was the days when, I mean, if anyone's old enough to remember this, you actually put film in a camera. It was different. To be honest, in those days, of course, there always has been the ability to create fakes. Ever since photography was invented, people have been finding ways to create false images on film. But that task has become extraordinarily easily, probably since the early 2000s. If you go back in time to the 1990s, that it wasn't so easy. This is why I take that Weiby crop circle footage seriously as well, because that was from 1996. This was from 1990, and it has been examined. Yeah, the print has been examined. Yeah. The skeptics and believers are both playing roles in the creation of the Calvine legend, with the storytellers, such as myself, providing the raw materials. The dialectic becomes most intense when those subcultures come into contact with each other. Well, I suppose that's inevitable, though, Dave, isn't it? Yeah. Since the Calvine story broke, social media has been buzzing with competing and contradictory theories. Yes, including those created by me, yes. Believers in the ETH, extraterrestrial hypothesis, aliens in other words, see the photograph as validating beliefs they already hold about the alien presence on Earth and the government's cover-up. Yeah. On the other extreme are the skeptics who seek to dismiss the image as just another obviously hoaxed UFO photograph. From their perspective, as UFOs and other exotic aerial objects do not exist, the photo must be by definition false. Must by definition be false. All that has to be done is to establish to their satisfaction how the hoax was carried out. But there lies the problem. You see, David doesn't take any position on this. I think what he's talking about is essentially inevitable, because you can't stop people talking about things. I'm just going to get some more dragon juice here. There we go. There we go. Right. There you go. Right. You can't stop people. People are inevitably going to discuss things. It's not gone away. I mean, how do you make it go away? How do you stop people talking about it? You can't stop people talking about it. I might skip a bit here, because then he goes over some stuff that I've already addressed, which is it's the theory. I mean, believe it or not, Professor Simon Holland chimed in on this. He didn't go along with the bloody island in the sky, did he? Oh God, the island with the reflection. That was bloody ridiculous. That was. And then there's Wim van Utrecht. I've already addressed his point, which is it was a Christmas tree ornament. And it's Clark, to give him his credit. He quotes Sherlock Holmes here. Sherlock Holmes was a creation of Arthur Conan Doyle, who was a believer, very, very strong believer. He says here, it is a capital mistake, Watson, to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories instead of theories to suit facts. That's absolutely right. And Clark understands this. I mean, Clark has been quite good on his position, has been quite good on this. Like I said, he's wrong to dismiss the possibility that the Calvine object is alien, but apart from that, he's, I can't really fault him. And there's Professor Simon Holland. All right. Oh, God, here. Step forward, filmmaker Simon Holland. Right, I've not seen this yet. What's this here? Do I have time to go into this? Daily Record. All right. Oh, it's not. It's just linked to Daily Record. He believes he single-handedly solved the mystery. It's the diamond-shaped object is a stealthy radar-evading platform on a test flight. Oh, God. Anyway, let's just skip this little bit anyway, because there's a little bit here we don't really need to look at. I mean, Simon Holland. I mean, Professor Simon Holland. I've talked about him. I think he's quite a dishonest individual, actually, because he's one of these people who is dealing with the presence. I think he's clever enough to see the writing on the wall when it comes to disclosure, and he's, of course, is one of these people, as Sam Harris said, if you remember my previous video in the series. He's going to, I think is going to have to make an apology to people they've been laughing at for decades. Sam Harris has the maturity to do that. He has the, Simon Holland doesn't. As a result, he's trying to rewrite his own history. He's trying to maneuver himself up the starting grid before the disclosure light goes green. I've noticed him doing that. I covered this in a previous video about how crafty he's being with this. It's interesting how it's interesting. I've been studying how the skeptics are reacting to what's happening. And Mick West has sort of gone quiet. Cox is just Coxey, the Coxer, is trying to just stop talking about it. And Holland is like he's trying to ride the dragon. It won't work because we got him on record saying what he said. I mean, he can't rewrite his own history. Anyway, the evidence available at the time appeared to suggest that this, was a clever hoax, but since then, a mass of new evidence, including the discovery of the first generation print kept by Craig Lindsay, led more towards the type of idea now promoted by Simon Holland, namely that this was a case of a secret military technology on a test flight. My sources suggest the technology was an American stealth platform operating in the North Atlantic at the time of Operation Granby. I don't know what that is. The West's response to Iraq invasion of Kuwait that led to, that's what it is. The West's response to Iraq's invasion of Kuwait that led to the first Gulf War of 1991. But I have to accept that I may have been led to believe that for reasons best known to my sources. Right, his sources. As I explained, I think I've explained this previously. I'll just check. I think I did cover this in a previous video, but yeah, I did a thing about the Clown's Day Off thing. I had a little. I had a little meeting with somebody. Now, I'm not being furtive. I'm not trying to be provocative and furtive here, right? But I was at a conference, one of the conferences I went to in 2022. I won't say which one. And I was approached by somebody who showed me he showed me a document and he played me some audio where I can hear Dr. David Clarke's voice and another man's voice. And I won't go into details because I swore to this person I wouldn't reveal where I heard this from. Okay, so I won't say who. No way will I tell you who sent it to me. He wouldn't let me copy anything. He wouldn't let me take it away. He said, this is completely confidential. I'm not supposed to show you this. Then, having listened to the dialogue between Clarke and this other person who is an alleged former defense intelligence officer, Clarke is convinced of this man's identity. He's checked his background, he says. This is because of this conversation, I think, that Clarke is so convinced that this is an American secret aircraft being tested. Now, in my own videos on this subject and my own articles on this subject, you can find them all of them are on the UFO Disclosure blog. I go into details about why I think that's not the case. why I think there's a bit more going on than that. And I think Clark, as he says here, you know, I think he essentially admits here he's not absolutely, you know, he's essentially taking a lot. He is taking an awful lot of, what's the word? He's depending an awful lot on the honesty of this source. Anyway, I don't need to share screen right now. What I also know as a folklorist is that charting the evolution of a story and the continuing reaction to it from a spectrum of skeptics and believers is proving far more interesting and insightful than the true or false status of the photograph itself. And he quotes Charles 14. Now, there's this interesting, you should watch this actually. This is a video which I recommend. Here we go. This video here.
Hey guys, how's it going? We're back again.
Hello.
Hello. Right, that's Vinny there. Vinny, Giles, Matthew. That's David. That's Dr. David Clark there. And I do recommend. I put a little comment on here a while ago. This is actually quite going back.
Hi guys.
On the,
you know, some of these things.
Some of us here.
Well, that's something for the Americans.
He says this is the
which is pretty much just ignored that question altogether.
Yeah, he's talking about his. This is the bit that's interesting.
Minister of Defence.
I'm not going to play this whole video, but he talks about his interaction with James Heapy, the Armed Forces Minister.
Name escapes me. Ben Wallace. That's it. And he got one of his minions.
Ben Wallace was I think he still is the Minister of Defence.
To respond, one of the junior ministers who basically it's exactly
that's Heapy. That's James Heapy.
What I expected them to say. Sorry, you know, the thing that's being released at the National Archives is the only surviving historical record, and we can't say anything more about it. He pointedly did not answer one of the specific questions, which was the QRA, which is the Quick Reaction Alert Squadron, triggered by an intruder aircraft on that particular day.
In other words, was this an interception? Was the craft? It was the aircraft you see there, the Harrier, intercepting the object. Although Harriers, that's not the role of the Harrier jump jet. It's a land attack aircraft primarily, but it could be that was the only thing they had on the runway that day. You know, it's who knows? Maybe the other planes were all in repairs or they broken down or something.
They just ignored that question altogether. Which was a question that one of our RAF contacts said that we should put to them. And that to me is a bit suspicious because they didn't even make an excuse like, oh, it would cost too much money to go looking through the records, which is the usual.
Yeah, you can watch the rest of that video. It's on Disclosure Team. This is a good channel. If you remember, they were at the I think it was Disclosure Media, I think, who were at I think they were the ones at the Blackpool gig. Do you remember that guy Graham who was on the video the other day with Stephen Bassett, the witness citizen? We met him, didn't we? This is and here's Clarkey talking about the Cosford incident. That'll be very interesting as well because, of course, I know another witness to that particular incident. Anyway, guys, let's go back to the Substack, shall we? Here we go. Who knows where this modern legend will go next? But if you want to keep up to date with the latest developments, he just advertises the Disclosure Team now. Okay, so that's very interesting. That's an interesting sort of story there. Now, what happened was he's referring to there was an article released. This one here in the Scottish Daily Record. Here we go. If the page will open. Right, here we go. Right, I'll show you that video. Don't worry about that video. I'll show you it in a minute. Investigators believe... how's the action go? Investigators believe Scott could hold important clue to one of the world's biggest UFO mysteries. Why do I sound like Billy Connolly? The Daily Record has learned that the person who took the photo was a young Glaswegian working at a Pitlochry Hydro. That's the big hotel in Pitlochry. Investigators believe a Scot could hold an important clue to one of the world's biggest UFO mysteries. The Calvine photo was taken in Perthshire in 1990 and is regarded as one of the clearest UFO pictures ever taken, but is at the centre of a mystery after the images sent to the Ministry of Defence disappeared. They did indeed. They were obviously put into a classified file. But one certified copy emerged last year showing a diamond-shaped object in the sky above Persia, believed by some to be the world's best UFO photo. The Daily Record has now been told that the person who took the photo was a young Glaswegian called Kevin Russell. Well, there's several stories about that. He was some say that he was a Glaswegian, some say he came from Falkirk, as you heard. Some say he's living on an island somewhere off the west coast, one of the little islands. There's lots of those in Scotland. It's that the quest for Kevin Russell is still going on. He was working as a porter, that's a kitchen porter to be precise, at the Pitlochry Hydro Hotel at the time. Kevin and a friend were left terrified by the 100-foot-long aircraft. Well, how big it is, it's hard to know. Judging the size of something in the sky is very, very difficult unless you can get a proper range on it. You have to know how far away it is. There's many ways of doing that, but which they said hovered above the A9 near Calvine for 10 minutes, then soared off at high speed when buzzed by RAF jets. Yeah, it did hover. The word hover is very important because if it hovered, it wasn't an aeroplane. Airplanes can't do that, no matter how sophisticated. That there is the artist's impression and not the photograph. That there, of course, is the photograph. Investigator Matthew Ilsley told the Record the identity of Kevin Russell, the photographer, remained a secret for 33 years until now. Oh, we know his name. All you have to do is flip the photo over. Actually, or at least it's probably him. I mean, it just says copyright Kevin Russell, which makes it likely that he's the photographer, doesn't it? We would very much like him to come forward and confirm once and for all that what he saw was real. So would I. Kevin, if you're watching, please get in touch with me. My email, bennyj74@gmx.co.uk. It's on the Hapanmo TV blog. Anything you say to me will be held in the strictest of confidence until you decide otherwise. But I'd love to talk to you. I really would. You're a vital witness to this. I mean, goes without saying, your testimony is essential. It will clear up so much. It'll clear up so much of the doubt and so much of the uncertainty. The most likely truth lies with human aircraft advancements that were covered up by the MOD and US intelligence agencies. Well, as I explained, that's a possibility that it would depend on the factors, the various factors involved in the movement of that aircraft, the various properties that it had in terms of lift and propulsion. Because, again, the story is that it hovered and then shot vertically up into the sky. Airplanes can't do that. Helicopters can do that, but helicopters have rotor blades. They make a distinctive noise. And he says it's potentially a piece of military history that can be unlocked once and for all. Ilsley said Kevin would likely be in his 50s now. Hotel colleagues who were tracked down said he returned to Glasgow in the early 90s. Okay. All right. Exhaustive research. Who's that? Exhaustive research by UFO hunters involved contacting 150 Kevin Russells in Britain, Australia, the US, and Canada, and about 300 more Scots called Russell. None confirmed they were the right man. Ilsley said the Calvine file should have been released after 30 years in 2021. But the MOD blocked the release of key details until 2076 due to privacy concerns. Now, that's nuts. That's absolutely crazy. And we know that from the mouth of none other than His Lordship, the Pope, Nick Pope the First, because he has said quite clearly that the only thing they have to do is comply with the Data Protection Act, which means all they have to do is black out people's addresses and things like that. And we know they can do it because they did it to all the previous UFO files held by Secretary AS2 at the Ministry of Defense. We know that they can do that. So that's a big excuse why it should be held for 2076. I mean, we'll all be dead by then. Also, maybe that's the idea. Do you remember when Jack the Ripper happened, 1888, Jack the Ripper murders? Those files were all classified for 100 years. But when Stephen Knight went to the records office in Kew in 1988, he was told they'd just been classified for another 100 years. See what I mean? Why don't they just say we're just going to classify them forever? Anyway, Some UFO experts believe the object is a secret U.S. reconnaissance aircraft named Aurora, a silent supersonic spy plane. Okay, if it is that, firstly, it could be that. I mean, it doesn't have an aeroplane shape, but it could be. It has the aerofoil built into its fuselage, like some high-altitude, high-speed aircraft do. We don't know what the Aurora looks like. I mean, there's lots of artists' impressions, and there's even some Airfix model kits that have been produced. But what it looks like, really, we don't know. But it's not silent. It's an aeroplane. It has a propulsion system involving a jet engine of some description. And it is an aeroplane. It has to move forward and keep in the air with aerofoil action. Now, who's this photograph here? Right. This is said to be Kevin Russell about 1990 when he took the photos of the alleged UFO. This is the guy apparently who's the photographer. The photo of Kevin was supplied to Ilsley recently by a person who worked at the Pitlochry Hydro in 1990. It was revealed last year that the former MOD press officer Craig Lindsay had worked on the case when the photos originally came to light. To the astonishment of the UFO buffs, he kept a copy of the... Yeah, we've done all that. We know all about that. And then, of course, there's Kevin Russell there. So that's him. That's Mr. Russell. How he looked. Obviously, this was like 32 years ago. He'd look older now, obviously. But, yeah. You may recognize him. Let's see. I think we've already done that bit. Yeah, we've done all that. But we covered that bit. Craft, stealth bombers, etc. Yeah, there's all kinds of different stories here about what it is. Bloody blah. All right, guys, let me just show you the video. Let's just show you this video you might find interesting. I told you about this earlier. This is a video about, whoops, if it appears. Come on then, right. Just go to full screen now.
According to the UFO files, in August 1990, two hikers were walking in the Scottish Highlands, close to Calvine, north of Pitlochry. Suddenly, they saw something incredible.
Oh, that's a bit over the top, isn't it? That's slightly over the top.
It was a chance for the picture of a lifetime.
Again, that's not the pic photo. Now, see, if it did that, if it really maneuvered like that, that's not the Aurora. It's not an aeroplane. That's one of the 5 observables, instant acceleration.
The hikers immediately contacted journalists from the Scottish Daily Record newspaper. After viewing their photos, the journalists chose to share both pictures and negatives with the Ministry of Defence. The UFO desk files say that the images were then analysed by the best team in the business.
Again, that's not the photo. And what the hell has Nick Pope done to his hair? Honestly, man. Oh, look, he looks like he's literally had an electric shock or someone's tasered him. Look at that. Look at his bloody hair.
Staff sent these images to JARIC. That's the Joint Air Reconnaissance and Intelligence Centre. Now, this is the UK's
see the man in black there? Oh, look.
Centre of
see the man in black standing over him?
When it comes to imagery analysis.
They identified a small jet in the background, but the large diamond-shaped craft in the foreground defied classification.
These intelligence personnel come to the conclusion that these photographs are real, it's a solid craft, and no one has the faintest idea what it is.
At the time, Nick Pope was a junior member of the UFO
I remember when he looked like that, Harry Potter. Yeah.
Team. He remembers the response of the MOD's top UFO expert.
He started gesticulating, and he said, well, we know it's not the Americans, and he pointed his finger that way, and he flipped it the other way, and he said, it's not the Russians, and he said, and that only leaves And he did that. And my boss looked at his finger and looked up at the ceiling. And we all just looked at each other and nothing further was said.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, believe it or not, I know Nick Pope's not the most honest person on earth, but I can actually believe that that's true. And the reason I believe it is because basically I've heard stories like that from so many other people. And this is the thing. This is the thing when they go, well, what is it then? Well, we don't think it's our own secret aircraft because they tell us and stuff like that. They wouldn't be flying near the U.S. Navy. Could it be China or Russia? No, we don't think it's that. And all right, who is it then? Oh, well, we don't really know. And it's kind of like, it's almost like that. They're saying it's aliens without wanting to use the A word, basically. Or what's that catchphrase I used? It was even the title of one of these videos. It's not aliens, but it might be aliens. That sort of thing. Yeah. So that's a very interesting. That's a good reconstruction there, and interesting stuff there from the Popester. Okay, that's that finished with. Okay, now one thing is pretty clear. One thing that's very interesting is now I won't show you the source for this. I can't remember what it was, but anyway, in this search for the enigmatic camera AED-1, Clark had this. He has this secret insider. Now I know people always say, "Oh yeah, don't tell me. Was it Commander X?" But you know, let's just assume that this is a real person. Clark says he's trusted. He showed a friend. He introduced this guy to a friend. He has all documents that indicate he is who he says he is. He's a former UK intelligence defense officer. And Clark said actually at one point, he says, "I think we're as close as it's possible for anyone to be." And as I said, I don't know who this person is. The person I spoke to at the conference didn't reveal this person's identity, but they just revealed to me was a document, and which doesn't mention that person's name. And they also revealed to me an audio which is about 20 minutes long, in which Clark and this guy have a discussion. And this intelligence officer says that the mysterious object, this is interesting, was a target designation companion for the F-1117 Nighthawk stealth bomber. And that's all he said. He didn't give any details about what that means. But you can put target designation. We're just going to put target designation. We're just going to put that into, let's just put this into Google here. See what we get. Oh yeah. Oh, that's because I was searching for it before. Okay, let's have a look. We have these various things. Let's have a look at what it might be. And we have these images. No, nothing really. But this is the there we are, Nighthawk. This is the aircraft they're talking about here. And it was this was actually a part of the test project for this. Now, this is an aircraft that was quite new. It wasn't new as such. It was developed in the 70s, but it had only been recently declassified. It was literally declassified just 4 years earlier in 1988. Before that, it was top secret. This aircraft with a very distinctive shape. The reason it has that shape is it's designed to be very difficult to pick up on radar. So it has this slightly unusual. It's probably not as aerodynamic as it could be as a result. But there's the F-1117. Yeah. So that apparently is what it was. It was whatever it is, a target designation companion. I mean, there's, like I said, I can't find any details for that. And he says, by 1 to 1,000,000 chance, Kevin Russell and his companion were at the location in time to witness the passage of the object, and it caused a stink in Washington. A 1 in 1,000,000 chance. I thought this hovered over the A9 road. Now we're going to go in a bit more detail in a minute about exactly where that photograph was taken. Yeah, it caused a stink in Washington because no one was supposed to see it, even though it was actually flying over a main road, the A9. Doesn't make sense. Also, doesn't make sense that it says it because the object apparently, according to this source, was deployed from RAF Machrihanish. Now, RAF Machrihanish is a very important base. It's a former RAF Joint US military base in Argyll, Scotland. Now, if you look on a map, it's a long, long way from the Cairngorms National Park. It's actually on the Kintyre Peninsula. You know, the little bit that hangs down on the west coast of Scotland. That's where it is. And so now, if you're going to deploy an aircraft from there, and you wanted to test it, I imagine the best thing to do would be to send it out to sea. Firstly, you'd only take off at night, then head out to sea without any running lights, at a high altitude, out to sea, west of Ireland into the Atlantic Ocean. There you could basically do whatever you wanted and no one would ever see you. Instead, it flies northeast, if you look at the map, northeast over very populated areas, not far from Glasgow and places like that, and to the Cairngorms National Park at low altitude. This was a low altitude, and it's a 1 in a million chance. It wasn't a 1 in a million chance at all, was it? It was, so that didn't make sense at all. But RAF Machrihanish it's always had a sinister reputation. We know that US Special Forces were based there. We know that it's supposedly from as long ago as the 1990s, it was used to test the Aurora. Now, this same officer said that the Belgian UFO flap of that year, which you may be familiar with, the 1990s flying triangle flap, was connected to the Calvine sighting. Now, that's interesting because what was detected by the Belgian military was they were not airplanes. The objects detected by the Belgian military in 1990 were actually very, very similar. They had what were known as the 5 observables. You know, sudden moves, high acceleration, things like that, the ability to hover, stuff like that. Now, to be fair to this possibility, there are some interesting pieces of evidence to suggest there is an unusual aircraft, at least one type of unusual aircraft in the sky today, which is classified and looks very different to what we're used to in terms of what we think an airplane should be. Now, one of those is this particular case. Now, if you go to this forum, I'll just show you this forum here. This is in the good old days of it's a good old-fashioned PHPB forum. This is from 2009. Secret projects, unbuilt projects, military and aerospace technology. We're talking about the Chris Gibson sighting. This was a guy. Chris Gibson is a man who was an engineer on an oil rig, and he actually found this. He did a photograph. Pardon, what am I talking about? He didn't take a photograph, but he was looking up one day from the oil rig and he saw this, what you see here. I don't know how well you can see this. I don't think you can actually get a better view of this. But anyway, it's this. He saw this formation, these aircraft in formation. So the first thing he saw was this is a KC-135 tanker. He recognized it immediately because he's a member of the Royal Observer Corps. This guy, he used to be. This is the KC-135 tanker there. And it was been escorted by these 2 Tornado fighter jets. But then the object behind the tanker, which was actually in a location where it would be if it was having an in-flight refueling, was this strange triangular with this really weird triangular plan. And he said he'd never seen anything like that before. There's several other artist impressions here. You see, there's this artist impression there. Things like that. Here's another one. I think that's the one there. And the idea is this might be Aurora, and there's several other artist impressions as well of what it might be. But that's an artist impression based on the sketch that he made, which you saw just now. This is the original sketch by Gibson. And you see here, this is another adaptation of it from the Irish Sun. That's the object there. That's its size and its shape compared to the tanker aircraft. And now are the Tornado jets, as you see there. So to be fair, that is the idea that there's some kind of secret aviation project out there somewhere is completely legitimate and probably true. It's probably true. There's also this as well, which is quite well known. I didn't discover this; it's been around for quite a while. But there's this as well: U.S. patent anti-gravity device. This is on blowper.com, and you see images like this here. Andrew Johnson, I think, has discovered this here. This is of something that looks very much like what Gibson saw, doesn't it? The triangular-shaped plan of an aircraft. But then there's this diamond-shaped thing here too. And it says here, the inventors proposed the use of properties of high-energy electromagnetic field generators to interact strongly with the vacuum energy state. This is not an aeroplane. This is a craft that flies using anti-gravity, which is man-made. It's a human-built aircraft. Now that there, doesn't figure 2 there look very much? Can you see that? Just checking you can see that. Yeah. Doesn't it look so much like that diamond shape there with these little features on? Doesn't that look rather like what was in that photograph? Could that be what was photographed that day? Possibly, but I have there's a couple of problems with that theory. First of all, its behavior. Now, if that was indeed a secret aircraft of that type, with that level of classification, something that doesn't even use a jet engine or aerofoils, the jet engine for propulsion or propeller, piston engine, fuel with which you refuel, and instead had some kind of free energy device powering it, and it was lifted not by aerofoil action or by a rotor or an envelope filled with lighter than air gas, but by an anti-gravity device. You wouldn't be flying it over a main road in Scotland, guys. You wouldn't be flying it anywhere like that, especially if it's coming from Machrihanish. And here's I'll just give you another example of something that I covered myself a number of years ago. This is an article by me, TR3 to be declassified, ? This is from 2018. And it's just a short article. You can pause and read it. There's nothing particularly interesting here, but you may have seen this image before. Supposedly, it's a patent. Some people say it's fake. It's a patent document for the TR3B. So it's understandable, perfectly understandable. Now, after there's been a lot of investigation into exactly what went on with on that day, the day that Kevin Russell and this other guy went up to take this photograph. They didn't go to take the photograph. Some people claim they were poaching. This is one of the reasons they've kept quiet. It's got nothing to do with the UFO as such. It's because they were poaching, and it's possible the hotel might get into trouble because it might have been common practice at that hotel for them to go onto public land and try and grab some pheasants or something for the pot, which of course will get the hotel into trouble if they were doing that regularly. If they were regularly stocking their kitchen with game caught on private land, they'd be in big trouble. But anyway, several people have investigated that area. They've gone to that location. They've tried to find. It's difficult. What background you get in that photograph? You just get you just see the object. You see some trees hanging down. You see some trees hanging down. You see. What's it? Hang on. Let's have a look at the photo again. Okay, it's the original photo. It's difficult to know because you see. This is the photograph itself. You see a barbed wire fence there. You see some bushes. There's very little in terms of background there. It's very, very faded, and you see trees hanging down. This indicates this was taken at a high altitude, up on top of a hill. And a number of people have done some surveys. They've they've gone to that area and they've explored. They've walked around, and they reckon that the most obvious place this could be, based on the geography of the area, people with local knowledge, etc., etc. The most obvious place it could be is somewhere called Struan Point. I'll show you now. Struan Point is here. I'll show you. Struan Point is there. You see Struan? It's there. It's a small village in Perthshire, Scotland. It's basically here. Now, to get there, you can see it's very obvious. Now, what they would have done is they would have probably driven, I imagine, from Pitlochry, which is here, all the way over here, which is just like a few miles away. There we go. And they were driven along this road here, the A9. to Calvine, which is here. Now, Calvine's a much smaller place here. They'd have probably gone down this little road here. And as you can see, there is a little turn off here, which there was a footpath leading up to Struan there. Just here. Now, unfortunately, there's no street view of this actual road here, but you can see where it leads off. Basically, you can go up there, park the car somewhere around here, and walk up to the top of that hill. You can actually see the hill up here in the distance. You see, and the researchers estimate that's probably where the object was taken. That's probably where the photograph was taken. The object would have been somewhere in this. It's possible that people from the road might have seen it, and it's been described as being over the A9. I'm just going to check my notes again. Mustn't get anything right. Mustn't get anything wrong. So I'm just going to just making some notes here. All right, now there was some confusion over the situation because Kevin Russell was. We know. I mean, it's only a matter of time before someone finds him if he doesn't get in touch with me or someone else. Because he was actually on the electoral register for the Pitlochry area in 1990 to 91. Now, he wasn't there in 1989, which indicates he only arrived a very short time before that photo was taken. And this would fit with the habits of hotel workers, because hotel workers tend to be seasonal. And in the Cairngorms National Park, there were a lot of hotels, and Pitlochry is primarily for summer visitors. I mean, there are winter visitors in terms of skiers and people like that. So you get ski instructors and people like that staying. But generally speaking, the hotels are running at full capacity in the summer. And for this reason, it's likely that Kevin Russell was just dropped in. He was just working there for the season. Then he would have moved on, maybe abroad, maybe to some other location. So it's not unlikely that he came along in 1990, put himself on the electoral register, and that name was removed when he moved in 1991. Now, there's also been some confusion because some people say, now, pay no attention to whichever side it is, that side there. Pay no attention to what that picture is there because this is not the real photograph. But the real photograph, of course, you see a plane. You see this airplane here. Now, some people are claiming that it's actually not a Harrier and it's a Hawker Hunter. This aircraft here. It's a very old plane, actually. It was one of the first generations of jet aircraft from the Royal Air Force. But it says here that where was it? I can't remember where it's actually written down. One of them was actually in service in the Royal Navy Air Arm. Here we go. 2 seat variants remained in use for training and secondary roles with the RAF and Royal Navy until the early 1990s, which means it could well have been a Hunter. It could have well have been a Hawker Hunter. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but it's people just curious about what that might be. So that's another issue. That's another thing we need to look into. All right. Okay, so let's go through my notes here again. Now there was of course the thing about it is if it was a hunt, I mean what these people say, because the researchers like Clark and others have gone, and his team from Disclosure Team, they went on to aviation mystery forums like the one I just showed you, and they asked some questions, and these people thought it might be a Hawker Hunter. The thing about it is, if it was a Hunter, this is unlikely to be an interceptor. It was more likely an escort, which means it would have been an official mission. This craft would have been flying with permission in UK airspace, and the RAF would have been escorting it, acting as security or observers or something like that. So it's not an invasion, it's not an infiltration or anything like that. In which case, you've got to ask the question: why would it fly over a main road? Why would it fly in broad daylight? All right, it was late at night, but it was like, late at night. They say this was after 9 p.m. However, in the middle of June in Scotland, near the summer solstice, it's actually daylight especially up north in Scotland. Even down south here in Oxford, you get like sunlight at 9 p.m. So now this is interesting. After Kevin Russell took the photographs to the Scottish Daily Record, that's when the D notice was slapped on it. That's when basically he was interviewed by Lindsay, and then he went back to the hotel, and then guess what? Some guys, it was a real MIB type thing, whether it was the real Men in Black or whether it was just government agents. David Clark thinks it was defense intelligence agents. They turned up in their dark cars and their dark suits, and they gave him a rough time. They heavied him a little bit. And as a result, he apparently suffered a major personality change. He became very shy and withdrawn when he'd previously been he'd been a sort of fun-loving, outgoing type of person. And he soon left the hotel and went back to his home. And some people say that was Glasgow, some say it was Falkirk, some say it was an island somewhere. But either way, he sort of disappeared and lost touch with his friends and that sort of thing, which is why he's so difficult to locate today. Until he contacts me, of course. So that's that. But that would be interesting if that was the case, wouldn't it? Now, researchers on the disclosure team with David Clark, they've been accused of harassment. Oh dear. And really, Clark and the others were defending themselves and saying it's standard journalistic, investigative journalistic practice to politely contact people and ask them questions if they're the subject of your investigation. Unless you're Richard D. Hall, of course, in which case you get into trouble. Anyway, we're going to leave this subject behind now. I think we've covered it. Well, I'll come back to the Calvine incident as soon as there is an update. And I've got a kind of feeling there will be soon. One way or another, there's going to be an update. But in the meantime, I just want to play you a little audio from Nick Pope. Now, this is... I'll show you the website just probably for fair use's sake. Unexplained with Howard Hughes, right? Now, The Unexplained with Howard Hughes. Now, this is one of my favorite radio shows. It really is. It's weird because when I was a kid, I always watched TV. I didn't see the point of radio because there were no pictures. Now I'm an adult. I just love radio. Where is it now? Go down here. Here we go. Edition 710. So you just go to this one. This is The Unexplained with Howard Hughes. Edition 710, UFO hearings and Glasgow ghosts. Okay. Now I've got the audio of this anyway, which I don't need to use screen share because it's just an audio file that I downloaded. But I'm just going to play you this particular bit with Nick Pope. Yes, so we're going to...
Across the UK, so no pre-record. Essentially, 92. This plan could one of them weeks, let's put it that way. And investigation which don't think...
Development is, it's happened. Now,
1945. Here's Nick Pope.
Thanks. Good to be back on.
You are man in a suitcase, Nick Pope. How was the last week for you?
The one and only Nick Pope. Pray silence, please, for his royal popeness. Yes, indeed. What's he got to say?
Hectic. Yes, I had just finished up a run of Ancient Aliens Live events, the 90-minute stage shows that's going all
Oh, you poser, Pope. You bloody poser.
around the US. And then I did Alien Con, and yeah, it was quite a whirl.
Tough at the top, isn't it, Nick? Can I have your autograph, please?
Now, look, the headline on this US Sun piece, and I'm guessing this is what you said, that they've already started taking evidence, depositions, presumably.
They have, yes. Now, we've talked about this before, and as you said in the intro, this all falls out of the provisions in the National Defense Authorization Act, which
is we're kind of coming back to what we started this video with the Senate hearings and things like that. However, the reason I'm playing this is because Pope says something very interesting later on. And so I'm not wasting your time here, I promise you.
Was passed just at the end of last year. But the update is that when you and I last discussed this was all hypothetical. This was all, well, this is what Congress wants to see. The new development is it's happening. It's happening now.
Well, I've already been through that about what's happened this week.
Behind the scenes, but the conversations are going on. People have already had meetings with various congressional staffers, and we will see more about this over the next few weeks and months.
What do you think it's going to mean? Do you think it will achieve anything, Nick?
Yes, I think it will. It's part of a much wider ramping up of the pace of all of this. You've probably seen that in the last literally week or so, we've seen an uptick in all of this. We've seen new films and videos coming forward, new photos, and we've also seen various congressional representatives coming up.
Okay. What did you make this week? I read this and I thought of you instantly. Steven Spielberg was speaking to Stephen Colbert, who I think you've also spoken with in the US. He said, I've never seen a UFO. I wish I had. I've never seen anything I can't explain, but I believe certain people who've seen things that they can't explain. I think what has been coming up recently is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And I think the secrecy that is shrouding all of these sightings and the lack of transparency, I think there is something going on that needs extraordinary due diligence. So even the man who brought us all of those bits of sci-fi that people said were trailblazers and mile markers for where we're headed, even he's saying that there is something afoot.
Yes, and I think people should always pay attention when all these apparently different things crop up at almost exactly the same time. So literally within a week, we have had the revelations about people testifying before Congress.
One person so far, Sean Kirkpatrick. We need the witnesses and things like that, don't we? Which hasn't happened. This obviously was made. In fact, I know it was made, this program, before last Wednesday's hearing.
We've had Steven Spielberg's statement. We've had Professor Avi Loeb co-author a paper with the guy who's heading up Arrow.
And you never know it though, would you?
Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. And we've had some more photos and videos hit the public domain, and some congressional representatives all speaking out, all ramping up the narrative all this week.
Of course, you know what people are like. There are always going to be people who say, well, this is just part of the disinformation dance that is done. And we will be led a merry dance here. We'll be taken, halfway up the hill, as we say in England, as you know, the Grand Old Duke of York, and then we'll be marched down again. Do you think that is likely? Because you and I have been talking now for the thick end of 20 years or more, in fact. We've seen situations where it's looked as if something really significant is going to happen. I've thought, and I know that you've had an inkling that we might be getting somewhere, but as of March 2023, how hot is this issue?
It's very hot in the United States, less so in the UK, though there are some things going on behind the scenes even there, so far as I am aware. But I think
he probably is not more aware than any of the rest of us. I don't think Nick Pope has any particular channel he behind the curtain. Do you know what I mean? He's essentially a former MOD UFO investigator who's become a TV celebrity. And being a TV celebrity, if you had your saucer in the hangar, to use his favorite expression, would you tell him? Would you tell a guy who's always on television who could just blurt it out any moment? Of course not.
The thing is, if people are thinking that there's going to be a single event disclosure.
No, this is interesting. This is what he says here. If any people think there's going to be a single event is disclosure.
If you like, then they're not going to get that. As I think we've said before, this is a process. And, one day you say, and you're right, we've been discussing this 20 years. One day we'll wake up and everyone will wake up and we'll realize that it's been done. It's just nobody will have noticed because it was a process rather than a single day, so to speak. So we'll be having this conversation one day, and we'll have the NASA study, we'll have the latest ODNI report, we'll have more hearings in Congress, and the consensus will be, yeah, it's a done deal. It's happened.
Is there any story that is, because you're always very...
Now, that's a remarkable thing Nick Pope just said. Now, on one level, it's not unlike what Steve Bassett said, because Steve Bassett has also said it's a process. It's a process. And I've also compared it to the arrival on stage of various actors. It's almost like we're watching a play of some kind, and different cast members keep entering and exiting. There's different scenes and things like that. And I've often said, I even talked about this with Steve on one of our previous interviews. This looked to me like some kind of controlled sequence, an agenda. Dare I say it, a script, a production design. And Nick Pope has said that, but then he also said, but then there's no, this is where he disagrees with Steve Bassett, and I disagree with him too, with Nick Pope. He says that if you're looking for a one moment, well, then it'll be disclosure. It won't happen. All will happen is that the idea that aliens are real it'll be inserted into society so seamlessly and stealthily that we won't even notice. Now, I doubt that. I mean, I know very well that ideas like that can be inserted into society, like in that way. They can just simply be slowly burrow underneath until they're completely underneath, and then they just come up through the surface, and they're just a part of normal life, and no one can remember how that happened. I know these things can be done. As I said, the government have top psychological think tank, people like Isabel Menzies Live, a think tank. People are working for them. So that's actually true. But I don't see how that can happen with aliens. I don't quite see how they can just maneuver us into that position where we just suddenly say, oh, one will go to bed one night thinking there are no UFOs and it's just nonsense. They'll wake up in the morning and they'll just be talking openly about aliens, and that'll be the end of it. Maybe that'll be just received common knowledge. Now, as I've said previously, there is some truth behind that. I think for the majority of people actually would be pretty indifferent to it, and they probably from the experience of their lives, that's exactly what it would feel like. That is precisely what it would feel like. But it's for us, it would be an obvious moment. There'll be an obvious moment of transition. And indeed, there would be for some of the normies as well. Some of them would freak out. I think the majority of people would be indifferent. This is why I've often said, if I was writing Roswell Rising today, that is the scenes at the beginning when disclosure actually happens, and so many people do freak out, I would write it slightly differently. I think I'd write it more like that most people were indifferent. It'd be like rather like that comedy Don't Look Up. It would be a bit like that, where most people just sort of shrug their shoulders and find it irrelevant. That, I think, I mean, it's a bit demeaning to talk about people in that way, but I think that is unfortunately how people would respond. That is how they would respond. So Pope has a point. See, maybe Pope has a point. Maybe it will be like that. Maybe about 2 years down the line. I mean, if you were in a coma for 2 years and you woke up and you said, "What? There are aliens?" And people at the time, and the people around your bed will say, "Yeah, there's always been aliens, didn't you know? Yeah, well, we've known there are aliens since the 15th century or something." Because of course, people, it's not just the present that changes; it's the past in people's minds. Oceania's at war with East Asia. Eurasia are our allies. That kind of thing. That's very real. So it could be that Nick Pope is actually right, and it will be done like that. I doubt it. I doubt it, but he might be right. Anyway, I think that's all I want to really play you of this particular interview with Nick Pope. But anyway, there you go. You can have a look at it if you want to see it. Now, as I said, I very much recommend this. The Unexplained with Howard Hughes. It's this one here. It's this particular. Pope is just one of several different. It says Glasgow Ghost. It's just because it's one of several features in that program. Now, I want to end with a bit of a Zen moment now. I want to take us back in time to the dark days of Panwo TV history. Because now this series of videos that I've been doing, UFO Disclosure, it actually began in 2015. I actually called it UFO Disclosure 2015 because I believe 2015 would be the year of disclosure. I honestly can't remember why that was. And at the end of that year, I made a video called UFO Disclosure 2015, I Know It Didn't Happen. I just want to play you the final scene. You'll see me sitting at a kitchen table. It's actually my kitchen table at home with my disclosure champagne there, unopened. And I'll just play you the final scene in that video, and also the closing titles. I'm just going to do a quick. There's something I've got to do quickly now for copyright reasons, because I'm going to use a. I'm going to be playing some music on license, so. So this is just it's actually an attribution license. So there you go. That's just the credit there, music by Chris Zabriskie, because it is. The music I'm going to be playing is it's not in the public domain. You can use it, but it has an attribution license. You've got to attribute the composer. So okay, where is it? Here it is. It was here. Here we are. Yeah, this is it. So I'm just going to. I chose the Odyssey version because Alt Tech. I'm using Alt Tech in principle, but. Here it is. Remember this, guys? How many of you remember this? Duck pond in their garden when they were in Parliament. You know, this is. I think that if Cameron or Obama stood up and said, I've said this before, haven't I? But if they sat there and they said, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Americans, or my fellow British people, my fellow Britons, and UFOs are real. Yes, they are, and we've always known about it. We've known about it for almost a century now, and yes, we just thought we'd let you know as well that we know. And yes, we forgot to tell you. It kind of slipped our minds. Well, actually, it didn't slip our minds. We kept it from you, but it was for your own good. We kept it from you for your own good. We had your best interests at heart. Actually, we didn't. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to confess we didn't have your best interests. How long ago was this? That was 2015, so yeah, 8 years. I don't look much older now, I must say, which is good. The fact we kept this secret from you has resulted in untold suffering for the death of how many millions? From starvation, from poverty. How about the destruction of the rainforests and the poison of the oceans and environmental destruction and the dirtying of our air? Could have all been prevented. We have told you, we know that. We know that. We're not going to try to run away from that fact. But I still hope you will find it in your hearts to forgive us. I really, really do. We will make it up to you, I promise you. We'll bring back school milk. There we are. Thank you very much. What do you think your Auntie Joan or your Uncle Alfie sitting at home with their glass of sherry or their cup of tea and their biscuits on the table with a TV on in the corner? What do you think in the summer is 20 years since we had the alien interview? And I've covered what he said. I sometimes think what he wants is impossible. The new year is a new opportunity. It's a new. Oh dear! It's a new beginning. It's a chance for everyone to make New Year's resolutions. That's why you have these New Year's resolutions and things like that. Take a step back, take a deep breath, and start again. I know it's an artificial date in the middle of winter, and it's not in line with any of the natural cycles of the Earth. I know that, but it is in people's heads and in our society. The New Year's Day has that significance. It has that significance of a break-off point and then starting again. So don't give up. Let's keep going. I will be making at least one film with the title, which include the words UFO Disclosure 2016. I will be making at least one video with that title. At least just one video, guys. That's all I made. Just one video. It probably won't be as many as this one, depending on circumstances. I probably won't make 12. Oh dear, how wrong I was. 12 of them, with an average of about 3 hours long. But I'll make some. In the meantime, it remains for me to say I really appreciate your support over the last year. Those who have followed this series of films, those who have watched them, commented, shared, even though I've thought about what I've said, and I've talked about it with other people, I really appreciate you doing that. It means a lot to me. All the comments you've given me, all the nice comments, even the nasty ones that have been interesting, because it gives me a chance to ridicule and to bite back. The live comments thing I quite like. I think it's a good idea. I've done it on other videos as well. You guys have really been great, and I couldn't have done it it wouldn't have been the same if it hadn't been for you. It would have been much more difficult to make these films without you writing to me and telling me how much you appreciate them. It means a lot. It really, really does. I hope you had a Merry Christmas. I made my little video saying Happy Christmas, and I hope you had a really, really nice one, all of you. And I wish you a very, very happy New Year. Whether we get to UFO Disclosure or not, I want all the best things you've ever wanted to happen to you in 2016.
I think I was a bit drunk.
So thank you very much for watching Hapanmo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, stop the New World Order.
Oh, the mummy! Do you remember the mummy? the alien slides. Special thanks to all those people. Kevin Goodman's passed away. So. Oh, nostalgia. Janie, of course, is oh, those were the days. Series. Awesome. Hey, Colin. That was that weird. $2015, blimey. Those are the days. Now, the reason I showed you that, I mean, watching that is fascinating. When I came across it, because I do sometimes review my own material, and it's interesting to see my attitudes all that time ago, 8 years ago, talking about UFO disclosure. And I think at that point, when I made that video, I felt that it was the end of something. I mean, especially the closing titles you saw there. I don't know if you could sense some real emotion in those titles, in that title sequence that I played there with the background music I chose, the pictures I chose. It's almost like a kind of goodbye moment, goodbye and thank you everyone. I'm gonna miss you. Did you sense that? Because I do. I don't remember exactly what I was thinking when I put that video together, but I sense that it's a kind of like an end of an era. Thanks for everything. We're moving on now. Goodbye kind of situation. You know what I mean? I find it's quite touching, really. I think that scene, that sequence, that end title sequence. But of course, nothing could have been the truth. That was just the beginning. Really, far from that being the end of an era, I continued with this project. I'm in the Project UFO Disclosure series of videos. I continued with it pretty much the same way.
and have done so right up to the present day. And I mean, someone actually made me aware the other day of my first ever UFO disclosure video. It was actually back in 2011, I believe. And I actually found an article that I wrote. It's funny because the reason I brought this, I started looking into this, I was having a discussion with an old friend on Twitter, and they said, oh, UFO disclosure, you keep saying it's going to happen when it's going to happen. We always think it's about to happen. It never does. And so I looked, and then I realized that it's actually on my portal. If you go to my portal, my UFO disclosure portal, I'll show it to you. Here we go. If you, the oldest... Believe it or not, I've got an entry on this portal that dates back. This is my first UFO disclosure article on Panmo Voice, 2011. That was 2009. This is the UFO disclosure imminent. But if you go down to, I've actually got one from 2007. Can you believe it? Here we go. Stephen Greer article. This is 29th of December 2011, Stephen Greer article in Nexus. The one I mentioned last month is now available online. I wonder if could this link possibly still be live after all this time? Nexus magazine article. No, it's not. Oh, you wouldn't expect that after Body. What is it? 16 years? Yeah, but I understand these people who think that this is just... It looks like something I've become fixated on that's always about to happen but never does. When you consider that my feelings that it's about to happen really haven't changed in all that time. So is this some kind of illusion I'm chasing? Have I just caught myself in an intellectual black hole, and I'm going around in circles just like Steve Bassett is and all these other people? Well, I don't think so exactly, because as Richard Dolan said, there have been changes, progress has been made, and you could say that from an objective point of view, especially since 2017. I mean, back in 2015, what would I have said if 2 years later, everything happened 2 years later? Would that have changed how I felt? Would I have ended that video the same way? No, of course not. Maybe I think we got to, if I want to be ultra cautious, I would say, just stick with what I said earlier. In this video, I said it's better to be an optimist than a pessimist, because if you're an optimist and you're proved wrong, you feel disappointed. But if you're a pessimist and you're proved wrong, you miss out on all the fun. No one knows the future. No one knows what's going to happen. But we do know the facts. We do know that I think it's indisputable that extraterrestrial life exists, and it's intelligent, and it's visiting us. It's also indisputable that there is a cover-up of that in governments, in the government circles. And I believe that means that such a cover-up can end. It is physically possible. And there's a chance it will. And believe it or not, we are moving towards a situation when that will happen. Like I said, if you prove me wrong, if I'm lying on my deathbed and it hasn't happened, you can gloat then, all right? You can say, yeah, la la na 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 na, proved you wrong, and you can enjoy it. But until then, you're not going to stop me. Thanks everyone for watching Hapanwo TV. Much appreciated. There'll be another video coming soon. It may even be another comments reply video at this rate. But I do have plans for others. I'm also, of course, I'm going to the Basis Project Conference, and I'll be doing a reportage of that. So, yeah, I've got other things I've got planned. So there will be more videos coming soon. And those watch parties I talked about at the New Year, got to get them done as well. Do remember, read the books, read the books. Don't just watch the movies. Thank you, everyone, for watching Hapanwo TV. Where's my hand? That's it. Come on. Anyway, try that. Anyway, hospital porters, pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.